If we'd all stand for the presentation of colors.
Everyone, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we excuse these gentlemen, I understand we'd like to invite them to the podium to introduce themselves. I don't know how we're going to do that holding flags. Sons of the American Revolution, why don't you lead this off? Come and introduce yourself and tell us what we're here for.
Thank you. Pleasure being here this evening. My name is Bill Cable, President of the Piedmont Chapter, SAR.
My name is Rick Reese. I'm also with the Piedmont Chapter, SAR, and Vice President.
I'm George Thurman, a longtime member of the Piedmont Chapter, and it's good to be back, Mr. Mayor. I'm Randy Pollard, also an SAR member and a new member of the Color Guard.
Good to have you, gentlemen. If you're not a regular council member, they come here on every special occasion, and tonight's one of those special occasions. So good, gentlemen, good to have you here. And we've got the ROTC. If one of these gentlemen with a gun can come introduce the other folks, that would be good. I don't want to leave the flag unattended.
I'm Ingo Ringo, and I am part of the ROTC program, and I do color guards. The one holding the American flag is Spencer Craig. He's our Sergeant Major. And the one holding the state flag is Cielo Castro. She is our XO. And then there's our rear guard, and that is Eddie Diaz.
Well, let's have a hand for the ROTC and the Sons of the American Revolution. Thank you. Everyone will take a seat. Well, we have a seat to fill tonight, and we've heard from the voters how they would like to fill that seat. So, council, do we have a motion to fill the unexpired term of the seat vacated by Betty Price?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move to appoint Mr. Donald J. Horton to City Council Post 3.
Motion by Councilman Eigelhart to nominate Mr. Horn to the seat. Do we have a second? We have a couple of seconds by Rich DePolito and Nancy Diamond. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That is unanimous. Councilman Eigelhart has a cold tonight, so he couldn't make it. So with that, Councilman Orleans. They're so much alike. Councilman Orleans. So with that, we're going to have an installation here, and Mr. Horton, if you'll come forward. And I believe you have someone here to administer the oath. Before you're administered, Before we get to the regular part of the meeting, as a citizen, would you like to address the audience before you become a council member?
I just want to say a few things. First of all, I am honored to be able to serve you. It was an incredible election, and certainly the campaign, all of the volunteers that did so much to make it possible. And I had an incredible volunteer team. There were hundreds of you that were out there getting my message around, and I just want to say thank you very much. I'm honored and I'm humbled to be your servant.
I'm Betty Price, and I used to have this seat, and it's been vacant now for almost 5 months, which really kind of broke my heart not to have some opinions on things, as I always did. But I know that Don will do a great job going forth, and apparently it doesn't require anybody of any particular authority to administer an oath, because the person actually takes the oath themselves. So I will recite it, and he will respond in kind with the same words as he takes the oath. But just before that, in case you don't know Don, I just wanted to give you just a little background bio on Don. He's lived almost 30 years in Roswell, having gotten lost in Michigan and Iowa along the way. My husband's also from Michigan, so we have a little bit of a bond there. He's been a professional musician, a little bond there with my son. In fact, Don was actually my choir director at one point years ago. So I've known Don for a really long time. He jumps into this not completely unawares. He's been a homeowners president for 8 years. If that doesn't tune you up, nothing does. He's been in the financial services industry since 1984. He has his own registered investment advisory firm and his own small business here in Roswell. He and Gail have been married for 45 years, and they have 2 children who are with them this evening, Aaron and Rachel, and 5 grandchildren who are almost asleep, but they couldn't possibly go to sleep because it's too exciting. But it is a school night. Anyway, I've known Don and Gail both from Roswell Presbyterian Church, where we all served as elders. I mentioned that he was my bell choir director at one point. He's also involved with the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing, the Kettering Executive Network, the Senior Industry Network Group, and a member of the Roswell Rotary Club. So he's been in the community for a good while. He also, in his spare time, is a gourmet cook, if you can convince him to cook you a meal. He's a photographer. He may take your picture, and he enjoys woodworking to calm him down from all those other endeavors. But before Don takes the oath, I just want to reflect a little on the origin of government from the Christian perspective. And if you believe in separation of church and state, you're welcome to leave the room for a moment, but if not, I'll exercise my freedom of speech just to mention some things that are on my heart today. As we know, or some of us know, God ordains the institution of government, and all authority comes from God according to his plan. Governmental authority is to protect and preserve man in the physical sense, to protect life and property, and to repress evil and crime in our communities. But because man has free will and the ways of God are mysterious, we know that leadership and government in this imperfect world is very difficult, and one must work very hard to deny himself and to stay within the will of God. This is a very challenging undertaking, and one that will change you immeasurably. God asks his children, actually he requires of his children, as written in Micah 6:8, to act justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And I'd like to offer a prayer for Don as he undertakes this awesome responsibility. So join me if you are so willing. Dear God, creator, sustainer, comfort, and guide, I ask your blessing on your servant leader, Don Horton. Give Don the spirit of love, kindness, and forgiveness as he works with this council, the staff, and the citizens of Roswell. Grant him wisdom, patience, endurance, discernment, and strength to learn, listen, discuss, deliberate, and to take action for the benefit of the citizens of Roswell. Remind him often that the public trust is a sacred gift to be honored and protected. Keep Don honest, open, sharing of his knowledge and of his thoughts. Make him creative and inquisitive as solutions to problems are sought. Bring his family and friends close around him to help him, to nurture him, and to keep him on the right track. Be with him in challenging times and keep him in your will. And finally, God, give him humor to remind him that some things are not really all that important in your majestic plan for mankind. To God be the glory. Amen. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Would you like to come forward, any family or friends that would like to be with him at this time? And Don has brought his Bible, which I will hold, I guess. And if you place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
that I, Donald J. Horton,
that I, Donald J. Horton,
will support the Constitution
will support the Constitution
of the United States and of the state of Georgia,
of the United States and of the state of Georgia,
and that I will, in all respects,
and that I will, in all respects,
observe the provisions of the Charter
observe the provisions of the Charter
and ordinances of the city of Roswell.
and ordinances of the city of Roswell,
And I will well and truly perform the duties
and I will well and truly perform the duties
of the office of member of the City Council,
of the office of and member of the City Council,
and that I will, to the utmost of my skill
and I will, to the utmost of my skill
and ability, endeavor to promote
and ability, and endeavor to promote
the interest and property of said city
the interest and property of said city
without fear, favor, or affection.
without fear, favor, or affection.
So help me God.
So help me God.
I think that's it.
This is the signing of the oath, so this is what makes it official, folks. Let's have one for our hand for this good oath. So, we've got a full council, if not seated here tonight, filling all these seats. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilman Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Wynn. Is there anyone in the audience have any questions on the consent agenda? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please raise their hands. Passes unanimously. That's a good beginning, folks. So we have some proclamations to read tonight. Veterans Day is coming up. So I have a proclamation to read regarding Veterans Day. Whereas in 1921, the unknown soldier was buried on a Virginia hillside in Arlington National Cemetery, overlooking the Potomac River in the city of Washington, D.C. The site of this burial in Arlington Cemetery symbolizes the dignity and reverence of Americans' veterans. And whereas these memorial gestures took place in England and France on November 11th, giving the universal recognition to the celebrated ending of World War I at 11 a.m. on November 11th, 1918. And whereas on May 13, 1938, Congress declared that the 11th day of November each year will be a legal holiday, a day to be dedicated to the cause of world peace, and a day of celebration to honor America's veterans for their patriotism, their love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. And whereas Veterans Day is a day to thank our veterans for their service to our country and acknowledge their contributions to national security, we would like to honor those who have served and sacrificed for their country on November 11th and every day. And whereas the City of Roswell is proud to acknowledge our veterans who are employed by the city, now therefore I, Jerry Wood, Mayor of the City of Roswell, do hereby proclaim November 11th as Veterans Day in the City of Roswell, and urge all of our citizens to recognize the sacrifices and dedications of our veterans today and throughout the year. And at this time, I would like all the veterans in the audience to stand, please. Let's have a hand for them. Let's stand up now and give them a hand. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your service. America Recycles Day. Roswell is a green community. Janet Lieberman, would you come forward? Janet serves on our Keep Roswell Beautiful Clean and is our environmental representative for the City of Roswell. Whereas the recycling market infrastructure in Georgia makes it one of the most prominent recycling states in the nation. Viable markets exist in the state for paper, aluminum, steel, plastics, glass, tires, organics, and electronics. And whereas recycling jobs have a positive impact on our communities and throughout Georgia, and whereas Georgia is the second largest pulp and paper producing state in the nation, accounting for over $10 billion of annual product sales and $1 billion in payroll, and the 15 mills in the states use recycled content for their production, with 9 of them relying exclusively on recycled materials for production. And whereas recycling saves energy, conserves water and other non-renewable resources, and reduces greenhouse gas emissions, resulting in better air quality. And whereas sustainable recycling programs provide the raw materials that businesses need to grow and thrive and promote private sector investment in public programs, and whereas in 2015, the Recycling Center recycled almost 1,700 tons of material. And the City of Roswell is pleased to announce that the Roswell Recycling Center will begin accepting oil-based paint from Roswell residents on November 3rd, and will also be expanding document shredding for Roswell residents to include Saturdays from 1 to 4 p.m. The Recycling Center will partner with the Atlanta Humane Society, Mansell Road location, to collect gently used clean towels, sheets, and blankets. And the City of Roswell, Keep Roswell Beautiful, will launch the second annual recycling contest for Roswell schools on November 1st. And whereas the City of Roswell and Keep Roswell Beautiful encourage all citizens to complete a pledge form promising to recycle more at the recycling center and curbside at their homes, now therefore I, Jerry Wood, Mayor of the City of Roswell, hereby proclaim November 15th, 2015 as America Recycling Day, and encourage our citizens to participate. And I want to brag for a minute. Roswell furnishes recycling not just for Roswell, but really for all of North Fulton County.
That's correct.
None of our neighbors rely upon this, and we're glad to furnish that service not just for Roswell, but for all of North Fulton County. Roswell has been a leader in recycling from before the time I became mayor 19 years ago. So we've been in the recycling business over 20 years and probably have the strongest recycling program in the state. I know every year we compete for the biggest cleanup, but there's one city in Georgia that has a brewery that is sponsor for their cleanup, and they give out free beer at the cleanup, and there's no way for us to compete with that. But other than them, we have the most participation in recycling and cleanup in the state of Georgia, and I'm very proud of Janet Lieberman and Keep Roswell Beautiful. And with that, Janet, what can you add?
I don't know. I think you said it all. I do want to add on the Ready, Set, Recycle School Recycling Contest. I want to thank Councilman DiPolito. He was the brainchild of that last year. It was amazingly successful. Over 26 tons of paper and cardboard were recycled in 12 or 13 schools. We've expanded it this year to include the high schools. We have also, Keep Roswell Beautiful is sponsoring the monetary prizes for that, and in addition to the first place awards, they have added second place monetary awards. So there's more money available for the schools to hop on and take care of that. I also want to add that we just found out our curbside recycling rate is over 80% each week. That is unheard of. The state of Georgia has about a 15%.
So if you're in that 20%, start recycling.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. And one more thing I want to add is just that, as you mentioned, we've been recycling longer than 19 years. The recycling program was started by a group of residents. Janet Russell is one of them. She is here tonight. I'd be remiss if I did not mention that and thank them for starting it, and then thank the city for taking it on, because it truly is one of the best programs. So happy America Recycles Day.
Thank you. Before you sit down, what's the next recycling program? Is it one for the chipper? Or is that what's next on the calendar?
The next one is Bring One for the Chipper, January 2nd. That's the Christmas tree recycling program, and we'll be back in December with a proclamation for that.
So if you, after you put up your Christmas tree and you're looking for some place to take it, where should they take their Christmas tree?
The two Home Depots in Roswell, the one on Holcomb Bridge and the one on Woodstock Road. The trees are chipped by Davy Tree, and the mulch is made available for free to Roswell residents and businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have the Geography Awareness Day. And let's read this. Geography Awareness Day. Whereas GIS Day was introduced in 1999, Basiri Environmental Systems Research Institute in Redlands, California, in coordination with the National Geographic Society. And whereas GIS is instrumental in creating and implementing to help in timely emergency responses, manage spatial data, support the efficient operations of water, streets, public buildings, addresses, and locations in public safety. And whereas since 1990, the City of Roswell has a dedicated GIS department. In 2004, Roswell zoning map was featured in the annual ESRI map publication, representing exemplary maps from around the world. The GIS department is modernizing and expanding its services to better support the citizens of Roswell. And whereas the City of Roswell GIS Department will host GIS Day on November 8, 2015 from 1 to 3 at Roswell City Hall. It's open to all employees and citizens, and will showcase paper and digital maps representing the different aspects of the City of Roswell, demonstrations of software, and highlights of what GIS means. Now, therefore, I, Jerry Wood, Mayor of the City of Roswell, do hereby proclaim November 18th as GIS Day in the City of Roswell, and call upon all of our citizens and employees to acquaint themselves with the contributions. I can tell you that's as far as information management, the GIS system, which most of us know is asking Siri how to get to City Hall and coming up with a map, is all part of GIS. It has revolutionized the way we track data and has made this city government more efficient, and I know we're in the process of substantially expanding that program. I've always been a big believer of it, and I think it makes us a better government and better able to serve our citizens. So Alice, what do you have to add to that?
Rather than hear me talk about GIS with my knowledge is like this much, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Barber, our GIS manager, who's going to talk to you a little bit about what GIS is, what it can do, and a little bit about our upcoming GIS program.
Thank you, Alice. For those that I have not yet had the chance to meet, I am Patrick Baber. I'm the new GIS manager for the City of Roswell. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, and as that name implies, it's a way to view, manage, organize, and analyze information about objects in space. As the local government, Roswell is responsible for managing a disparate array of geospatial information, everything from parcels to utility infrastructure, park facilities, city employees, and city vehicles. A GIS is not simply a way to identify the location of any structure or person, but a way to also get information about that location. So I can not only know where a parcel is, but I can know who owns it, who has owned it in the past, links to any documents such as permits or inspections. For things such as water pipes, I will know when it was installed, the diameter of the pipe, the material, anytime it was inspected, any faults that were found. But the real power of GIS comes from its ability to analyze that data and answer questions with it. If there is an outage in water pipe for a routine installation of new infrastructure, which citizens will be affected? How long will the outage be? What are their addresses? How are they notified? All these are answers that can come from a GIS. If the demographics in the city are changing, will the school system be able to support its new citizens 10 or 15 years from now? That demographic information can also be analyzed through GIS and suitable locations for new schools purchased in advance. The city of Roswell has decided to invest in its GIS, and as part of that, we are developing new tools, new processes, and that will empower the decision makers of the city of Roswell, and it will be tailored to their specific functions within the city. We will be rolling out these new tools over the next 2 to 3 years, and they will include better information and a more intuitive approach so that nerds like me won't be the only conduit into that new information. And as part of that, as part of this rollout, we would like to invite all the employees of the city of Roswell, mayor and council, to join us next Wednesday, November 18th, here at City Hall, room 220 at 1 o'clock for our GIS day.
Now, we have certain GIS information available to the public, don't we?
That is correct, we do.
For the benefit of all those folks who are not going to be at City Hall, how do they access that information, and what is available publicly to the citizens in this room?
Currently, they can go to the city's website, and there will be a link there to the GIS page where there are several online maps that have parcel information and other basic information available to the city. However, our plan is to increase and build upon that so that city projects and other information relevant to the citizens will also be available through that same link.
So go to the city website, look up GIS, and the plan is to substantially expand what's publicly available with this new upgrade of our GIS system. Thank you. Let's have a hand for our GIS department. They do a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. The city of Roswell has great employees. I recognize that, and our citizens recognize that. But it's wonderful when other folks recognize what great employees we have. So we have one of those employees to honor tonight. Kay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Morgan Rogers, if you'll make your way to the podium, please. Morgan is this year's recipient of the Georgia Recreation and Parks Association 7th District Roy Hammond Leadership Award. Morgan was selected from amongst his peers to be recognized and honored for his dedication and leadership in the recreation and parks field. Morgan follows other city employee recipients in past years. Retired Recreation and Parks Director Joe Glover's received this award in the past, as well as the Deputy Department Director Jeff Pruitt received it. I know that some of the Recreation Commission members are here to honor and recognize.
Let's recognize those folks. Stand up, please, Recreation Commission.
And I believe.
Thank you.
I believe Commission Chair Deborah Ewing has a few remarks that she would like to make about the work that Morgan does. We are very proud of you, Morgan. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Congratulations, Councilman Horton. Oh, here I am. Well, we're not surprised that Morgan got this award because he is a leader. He's been a leader from the day he took his position was about a year ago, Monday, he said, right? So he had a lot to build on. He had great foundation to build on, but he has done a lot in this 1 year. He's reorganized the department. He's put employees where they need to be to grow, to advance their skills. He's partnerships. He's worked on partnerships inside the city with departments and outside. Nature Center, the National Park Service, Rotary, and partnerships are so important. Parks improvements, I didn't even have to ask him when we were going to see some improvements in the parks. He was already on it. Painting fences, cutting down shrubs, all of these things to improve the parks. And have you seen, they look much better. And it was elbow grease and some paint to start with. He's improved operation and maintenance already. We've seen some improvements in the operations department. Marketing, he set up a marketing committee right away. That's where Ranger Roz was born. He encourages new ideas. He's enthusiastic. Has anybody seen Morgan unenthusiastic? I mean, all the time. Maybe Janet might be as enthusiastic, but it spreads. It spreads among the staff. It spreads among the commission. And we are thrilled to have him on board. I'd like to introduce the commission. If you'd stand again, please. Jay Small, Steve Stroud, Angela Parham, and Tom Pratt.
Let's have a hand for that commission.
They put in a lot of hours, and I know they love what they do. We all love what we do. So this year, lots of new things are going to come on for this second year for Morgan. River Master Plan. Therapeutic Pool is going to open in December. The old mill is going to be starting to be rented. The trail over Bull Sleuth, finally. Long-term planning. His goal is to do some long-term planning, which I think is very exciting. He is an openness. He encourages new ideas. He is a natural leader. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you, Morgan.
I would like to thank the Mayor and Council, the Recreation Commission, and most importantly, the citizens of Roswell for allowing me to be their Recreation Parks and Historical and Cultural Affairs Director. There's not any, I think, I told some people, I spent my whole life getting ready for this position, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm humbled by the award, but I'm excited about the opportunities that lay before us in the city, and I just appreciate the honor very much. Thank you.
Thank you. One more hand for Morgan. Thank you. All right, it's down to work. So, Councilmember Becky Wynn, Liaison to the Community Development Department, if you'll call the Community Development Department calendar.
Yes, sir. First one is RZ 2015033134, and current variance is 201503135195 Chafin Road. This has been deferred to the November 17th Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Townsend. First time I ever beat you to the punch on this one, too.
I know.
Okay.
Welcome, Mr. Horton, to this evening. Yes, this item has been requested by the applicant to be deferred to the December meeting. They will have their Planning Commission hearing next week. So staff would recommend this application be deferred.
Is it the understanding of, I know there are two sides of this issue. As the public understood that there was going to be a deferral tonight, most probably?
Yes.
So is it fair to say it would be unfair to the advocates and the opponents to move forward with this expectation of deferral?
I think everyone is expecting it to be deferred.
I don't want to hear something if everybody's expecting to defer it, is my point. So we have a recommendation for deferral. Is there a motion for deferral?
A motion to defer to the December 14th, 2015 Mayor and Council meeting.
Second. There's a second motion by Councilmember Wynn, second by Councilmember Horton to defer. Any further discussion?
I would like to say real quick, Mr. Mayor, that the attorney has been in contact with some of the neighbors to show them the revised plans.
I believe so.
Yes.
Did anyone come here tonight expecting to be heard on this subject? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
The next one is an appeal of the denial by the Historic Preservation Commission for the construction of a single-family home. This is HPC 2015-02276, 52 Sloan Street. Mr. Townsend.
Before we begin, Mr. Davidson, would you, this is not a normal hearing before the council. Would you explain the nature and the rules of evidence on this hearing?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is an appeal from the HPC. It is a hearing. However, the decision that this council will make is based on the record presented to the Historic Preservation Commission, and the substantial evidence standard applies. In Georgia, the substantial evidence means any evidence. So if you find any evidence on the record, then you are to uphold the decision of the HPC.
So is it my understanding that neither the appellant nor the appellee will be presenting any new evidence tonight?
It's based only on the record. You can hear from them, but no new evidence can be accepted.
So given that there is no new evidence coming tonight, we will not be having a public hearing. This is not the time to present evidence. That was at the hearing. It's the time for this council to consider what was said at the earlier meeting. So we will hear from the appellant, we'll hear from the appellee, and then this council can choose to make a decision, but we will not be having a public hearing on this subject because it's on the record. We're not accepting any new evidence from either the appellee or the appellant. So is community development representing the appellee?
I guess I'm representing historic preservation, yes.
And so if you'll...
I will just give the facts as I am aware of them.
Facts, and then we'll hear from the appellant, and then we'll hear any rebuttal.
Okay. What you have on your screen before you is the actual standard, which David mentioned, that's in his UDC related to the record based on the historic preservation and the substantial evidence standard. This is an appeal of an Historic Preservation Commission's denial of a certificate of appropriateness for 52 Sloan Street. That denial was on October 14th at the Historic Preservation Commission. This is the current survey of the property. It currently has a structure on it that has been damaged. This is the survey of the proposal of the home that's to be constructed by the applicant at this location. This is the front elevation of the property as submitted to the Historic Preservation Commission. This was submitted to the Historic Preservation Commission. The red part is the proposed building structure located on the lot. This is an aerial photograph showing the location in the red box is the proposed lot for the proposed single-family structure. This is an aerial view closer up of that lot. You see the existing smaller house that exists that's been damaged at 52 Sloan. This is the front and rear elevations. This is the left side elevation. This is the other side elevation of the proposed structure. This is the square footage and the individual floors. The heated square footage is 4,553. The gross total, which includes all basements and garage, which are unair conditions, the gross total is over 5,400 square feet. Some of the information that was requested dealing with the review is in conjunction with the mass and scale of other properties in the vicinity. The Rayford residence, which is just adjacent, has a heated area of 2,400 square feet with a gross total square footage of 3,328 square feet. That was given to the HPC at their meeting. This is a visualization of the Rayford's sides of their property as they goes down Elm. This is the floor plan showing the square footages. Only a small portion is single story. There were numerous work sessions between the HPC members and this application. There were numerous public hearings, first dealing with the demolition of the damaged house and then dealing with new construction and the denial of the proposed single-family residence was on October 14th by the Historic Preservation Commission. This is the motion that they based their denial on related to the designs that were submitted and the guidelines indicating mass and scale of the building too large for the site in the surrounding area. The motion was seconded and the motion was voted and was affirmed, and the certificate of appropriateness was denied. If you have any questions.
After the appellant?
I don't
correct?
believe so.
All right. So does the council have any questions for staff? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. So all of this information, including the aerials, was submitted to the HPC for their...
I believe No, this aerial I created afterwards, but it was existing property. I don't believe HPC saw this particular aerial.
Okay, because we need to make our decision based on what they saw.
Correct.
Is there anything else in here that they did not see?
No, because they approved the Brayford's building, so they saw that before.
But was that presented at the hearing? The Rayford building?
I don't believe the square footage was presented, but the square footage I presented this evening was requested by other council members today.
Okay, well, I guess I'm a little confused because I thought we could only consider what was at the HPC, not questions that were asked.
Yeah, you should not consider the square footage on that one. It's supposed to, correct, it's supposed to be based on the record that was presented at HPC.
Okay, so the Rayford house was not presented at the HPC hearing, although it had been presented previously. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, Mr. Davidson, what are we supposed to be considering?
You're supposed to be considering what the HPC heard on this application. So, on this application throughout the process, yes.
Okay, so were these elevations included or not as part of the HPC presentations for this application?
They were not included as the official record. They went to HPC.
Okay, so they went to HPC at a different time period?
Correct.
Couple of questions. Could you show us what HPC reviewed as far as the elevations of this project? I'm confused now.
There's the front and the rear.
This was shown to HPC.
Correct.
This was shown to HPC.
Correct.
And was there a site plan? These are elevations. Was there a site plan shown to HPC? This is the site plan.
Correct.
Shown to HPC. All right. Did staff make a recommendation to HPC?
A recommendation of denial.
Does that recommendation still stand?
Correct.
Now, other questions that council may have? I guess here's a question for the lawyers and for council. Council can make a decision tonight. Council could defer for further consideration, I presume, if they want to take a look at the record and read do we have, the record is in front of them, but if they haven't had, we're not all well prepared when we come to this meeting. And staff, council, all these folks up here are, I'm fortunate, I hope I don't have to take a vote, but
you won't this evening.
So if council wants more time, they could ask for more time to review the record.
That's correct.
Would it be possible for them to remand to the Historic Preservation Commission with some question? Is that a third option?
Yes.
So they can rule, they can send it back, or they could defer and make a ruling at some point in time. When is their deadline to make a ruling?
30 days after this hearing.
At 30 days after this hearing. Those are the council's options. Any further questions? Councilmember Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad, I see on page 12 of 27 on the minutes, the applicant said he appreciates that, but he went from a 6,000 square foot building to a 3,400 square foot, including the basement. Where is that? Is that a different plan?
I believe the applicant will probably address that this evening. He did, in subsequent meetings, reduce the plan, but then when he was not received positively from the HPC, he wanted to go back to them with the largest building that he first brought to them that was, and asked for a denial so he could get appealed to you.
So we're only considering the larger one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? This time we'll hear from the applicant, from the appellate.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for hearing me this evening. I'm Jonathan Golden. I live at 355 Barrington Drive East in Roswell. I'm the owner and founder of Land of a Thousand Hills Coffee in the Historic District, and I have 2 other properties in the Historic District. I would like to build a home at 52 Sloan Street. I've been before the Historical Preservation Commission 4 times now. I have had numerous work sessions, subcommittees. What I'd like to do now is take you down and just briefly talk about each one of the meetings that we had, and then I'll request that I get approval to build this home. Okay, this is the current site. We were given a demolition permit at the last HPC meeting after we had 43 neighbors sign a petition requesting demolition. So the old burnt down structure, after 16 months, we were finally given permission to demolish it. This was my original plan, which was a 6,000 square foot building. We then reduced it to a 4,400 square foot building. That was denied. I then met with a work session, presented a 3,600 square foot building. That was after a previous work session where they said, draw this to my architect, draw it according to the sketch, and you will have our support, which he did. We then went to the work session, and they said they still felt like it was too big. This was the 3,600 square foot version. What I'm presenting to you tonight is the 4,400 square foot. This is a 3-dimensional image of what it would look like. This is the elevation from Elm Street. This is 115 Victory. We were denied based on size and mass. All of these properties were spoken about during the sessions. You can see the size and mass of 115 Victory, which is 3,400 square feet. This is 114 Sloan Street, which is 3,700 square feet. This is also on Vickery Street. I don't know the exact square footage, but you'll get a sense of the size and mass. This is 80 Sloan Street, which is 3,800 square feet. This is the Old Bricks, which is directly across the street from my building. When we talk about size and mass, this gives you a sense. It's directly across the street. This is the hair salon, which is a smaller structure next door, voila, but it has a very large parking lot in back. These are the condos in back of me. This is 46 Sloan Street. You can get a sense of the size and mass there. With the retaining wall, the fence, and the structure on top, it nears 3 stories. This is an aerial view. You can see the bricks, you can see 46 Sloan Street, and then my previous building is there to the right. This is a sketch of what the proposed building would look like. As you can see, 46 Sloan Street is 105 feet, 40 feet wide. According to my site plan, our structure will be 97 feet by 34 feet. This is not even taking into consideration the bricks across the street, nor the condos around. Just looking at my nearest neighbor, I believe it's in proportion. I would like to request the ability to build a very nice home there at 52 Sloan Street.
Does the council have any questions? Any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. How much of this information was presented to the HPC?
I'm sorry, can you repeat again?
How much of this information was presented to the HPC?
All of the elevations were presented. The existing pictures of the structures I presented. The pictures, well, actually, in my initial presentation, I did have to present pictures from the village. The aerial shots were not presented to the HPC.
Okay. So this was not, but the other photos that you showed us were presented?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And what is not represented here is the 3,600 square foot building, which I presented to a work session. And they said, no, you will not have our support for the 3,600 square foot because they felt like that would be too big as well.
Councilmember Wynn.
Yeah, Mr. Golden, so this, what's showing right on screen now was not presented to the HPC? What's on screen now? What you have right now on screen was not presented to the HPC?
Oh, no, this is the site plan that was presented to the HPC. This Google Maps aerial shot was not presented.
That's what I'm saying, what we are looking at now was
Correct.
not, so we can't take this into consideration. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
What's the, Councilmember Wynn?
Okay, and again, Mr. Golden, on work sessions, you did 6,000, 4,400, and then 3,600 on work sessions.
Correct.
But you went back to the HPC for the 4553.
Exactly.
That's the only time that you went to the HPC, to the board itself, to get either a
I
denial or...
actually initially went with a 6,000 square foot plus building. Then we had a work session, and we had sketches from members of the HPC, and all of this was on the record at the last meeting, saying, draw it like this. We then drew it according to those sketches and presented a 4,400 square foot building. I'm sorry, it's 4,500 square foot, and that's including the full basement, which real estate people typically do not include the full basement square footage. Without the basement, it was 3,100 square feet. At considerable expense, we presented those plans, only to have it denied. We then received another sketch, and that's when we drew the 3,600 square foot building, took it to work session. After drawing it according to a sketch, which members of the HPC, in fact, I have witnesses that said, draw it according to this and you'll have our support. We drew it according to that plan, took it to the next meeting, and it was denied at that work session.
Okay, but those were at work sessions, it was not at the formal HPC
Correct. The
hearing.
HPC was the 6,000 plus, as well as the 4,500 square foot were presented.
Okay, and is the 6,000 plus, is that heated or gross?
That was heated, including the full basement, correct. As
Okay.
is the 4,500,
So
that's
the-
heated,
so-
including
So
the
the
basement.
6,000 they deferred? Or
Sorry?
they denied the 6,000?
We deferred it at that point because they, we
Okay.
saw which way the wind was blowing, and they suggested we defer.
Okay, so the 6,000 was deferred, and then 4553 was denied? And that's what's brought you here
Correct.
tonight? Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Well, I think probably have basically the same question, but the clarification from Mr. Townsend that the certificate of appropriateness that was denied is the 4,400? Is that what we're looking at? So honestly, the
Correct.
the
It's
whole
actually
30
4,500, including the basement.
Okay, 45, whatever that number is, but the 36 is not relevant to the discussion. Is that correct, Mr. Davidson?
Well, I think anything on the record is relevant, so.
But that's not what is being.
But it's not being considered by this council.
Right.
Correct.
The thing that was denied was the 45, whatever the 45, 30
The
something.
3,600 was verbally spoken about at the last HPC meeting.
Right,
and
but again,
that-
that's not part of the certificate of appropriateness that was denied.
Correct.
I'm just trying to clarify what it is that we're deciding on specifically.
The 4553 heated.
That's what I thought, so I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilors understand it, there are three options available. You can affirm the denial, you can reverse the denial, or you can send it back with a recommendation, or finally you could defer this. What's the council's pleasure? Councilmember DiPolito.
I'd like to request that the staff show us one more time just those items that were presented at the HPC hearing so we understand what the information is that applies. Mr. Golden, you can sit down if you'd like. Mr. Golden?
Yes.
You can sit down if you'd
Okay,
like.
thank you.
Proposed site plan, the concept front elevation, the was not shown to them. This aerial was not shown to them. Sorry. I can't take it out of the PowerPoint. Front elevations, side, floor plans.
Do we have a motion?
Yes, sir. I think I do have a motion on this one. My motion would be to uphold the decision of the HPC related to the property located at 52 Sloan Street regarding construction of a single-family home of 5,476 gross square footage, and remand the matter back to the HPC Commission for consideration of a home that is appropriate for the historic district. And with that said, I would also say to Mr. Golden that I would recommend that you take the 3,600 gross square foot house back to the HPC, but that's my motion.
So it's a motion to remand to see if they can work something out, really.
Yes, sir. I was going to put a square footage on the size of the house, but I'm not going to hinder the HPC that way, but I would strongly recommend that they look at that 3,600 square foot house.
We have a motion to send it back to the HPC for further consideration. This is neither affirming nor denying, it's simply sending it back. Mr. Davidson, I think we're not affirming or denying, we're just sending it back?
No,
We're denying the appeal, but the application is still pending.
He can send it back without having to pay another application fee now.
All right, so it's denying the appeal, but the application is still pending. We have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Any further discussion? Councilmember DiPolito.
I have concerns denying the appeal because if we're looking just at the evidence that's on the record, in my mind, there's not enough evidence to decide either way. So if you're looking, this project essentially was presented in a vacuum. Now, I know you can look at the aerials and take a look at the aerials and all of a sudden it puts it a little bit more in perspective and you could argue one way or the other. But when you're trying to determine mass and scale, you can't determine mass and scale in a vacuum. And so I actually support the appeal, although I think it still needs to go back to HPC for them to take another look at it and really understand what's the appropriate mass and scale based on all the evidence. So I would actually support this appeal that he should not have been denied, but actually for a different reason, because I think there's not enough evidence to determine either way. So I would not support approving it, but I would support his appeal and then send it back.
Councilmember Diamond.
Well, now I have a question and a comment, but so if you uphold the appeal, are we not approving the project? So there really is it, the only way to keep it in play is to deny the appeal and send it back to HPC. Okay. And these are not on the things that have come from this that I would like to look at aside from this is why we don't have minutes on those work sessions. I realize they're not public meetings, but I think either we need to talk about how work sessions happen or we need to record those. And that's a discussion for another day, but I think it's important to talk about. And also, I'd like to see us find a mechanism for demolition before we get to a C of A in those situations where we have, like in this case, a fire where it's a hazard to be sitting up there. I understand you want to see what's coming next before you want to tear it down, but this I think is a situation that requires a different mechanism, and I'd like to see us look at that. So with that, I seconded the motion, so I guess that's my opinion.
For the record, the council is considering the way we hear appeals and the way work sessions are conducted at the HPC. That has not been decided, but that's been working its way through committee because I think it was a recognition on council. Perhaps we need to take a second look at how this whole appellate process is heard. But that doesn't come into play here because nothing's passed. Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. I just would like some clarification. It was my understanding that we could uphold the appeal, yet still send it back. That is not the case, Mr. Davidson?
No, if you uphold the appeal, then he gets to build his plan.
Okay, well then, my comments were based on the understanding you could uphold the appeal. But my comments still stand. I think you really need to have, you really need to look at these projects look at the entire surrounding area. You can't look at them just in a vacuum. So in order to really determine mass and scale, you have to look at the street, the surrounding area, what's occurring in the back, what's happening on the sides, because it all comes into play. Otherwise, you're basing it really just on personal preference rather than what is going on in the surrounding area.
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Looking at the record, though, there's over an inch of paper that goes through all the various meetings that occurred over that time, and the staff memo is very clear of comparing things throughout the whole historic district, and particularly on Sloan Street. So I think that that has been done. It may not be in the pictures that we just saw, but there's, you know, a large record here that goes through all the comparison like that. So I think it is valid for that. But probably shouldn't even throw in any comment, but I think the smaller building makes sense, but not as what we are apparently deciding at this point.
Any further discussion before we take a vote? The vote is to deny the appeal and remand it back to the HPC for further consideration, with the application still being pending. In essence, no final decision on what's going to be built on that site. Any further questions before we take a vote? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My next one is approval of a text amendment to the UDC sections 13.7.12 and 13.7.15 related to standards of review for the HPC, and this is the first reading.
Please, Mr. Davis, if you read the ordinance.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Article 13, Administration, Section 13.7.12, what approval criteria are used by the Historic Preservation Commission, and Section 13.7.15, what if a certificate is denied. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Section 13.7.12 be changed by adding a new subsection E, so that the section reads as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference. And Section 13.7.15 of the Unified Development Code will be changed to read as follows. Text again is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the first reading.
This is a proposed text amendment for the Unified Development Code dealing with the Historic Preservation Commission and criteria that they use. Section that's being added is Section E to Section 13.7.12. What approval criteria are to be used? In making a final decision regarding an application, the Historic Preservation Commission should consider and adhere to previous decisions made by the Historic Preservation Commission in the same manner, unless new evidence presented requires a different result. The section and wording being added to Section 13.7.15, what if a certificate is denied? The wording being added, on appeal, Mayor and City Council will give deference to the Historic Preservation Commission if the decision is based upon factors set out in the UDC Section 13.7.12 and upon the UDC guidelines applicable to the case. If the decision does not reflect the application of the factors set out in the UDC Section 13.7.12 and upon the UDC guidelines applicable to the case, Mayor and Council shall use those factors and guidelines to make a decision on the appeal.
Does the council have any questions? I'm going to open it up for public comment at this time before we entertain a motion. Does anyone in the public have any questions or comments? Seeing no hands up, we'll come back to council for any further discussion before we entertain a motion. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve first reading and second reading for December 14.
There's a motion to approve the first reading. Is there a second? Motion by Councilmember Wynn. Second by Councilmember Diamond. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time, we'll turn to Transportation Liaison, Councilmember Nancy Diamond, to call the transportation agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This first item is approval of a resolution for prioritizing sidewalk connections. Mr. Asenbrack is here and Mr. Del Ross.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, welcome Mr. Horton. Look forward to working with you. A few things on the agenda tonight for your consideration. The first is Roswell is seeking to become a more walkable community. Sidewalks are in high demand in our community, and this is a resolution to help further refine some of our criteria. There is another resolution coming to you after this one that talks about the connectivity partnership. That is not this. This is the intent of this document and this action is to refine the criteria.
Blow that up a little bit. It's hard to read.
That we use in selecting which sidewalks we want to build. And I will turn it over to the engineering design manager, Rob Del Ross, for further comments on this agenda item.
Rob, if you'll take a minute to get that where it's readable. Much better.
Basically, this item is to establish a policy to prioritize sidewalk connections in our city, primarily using sidewalk connectivity funding that you have been giving us over the years. We have presented this several times at committee and work session. What you see here has had no changes since you saw the policy at...
Just for the record, how much is in the sidewalk connectivity program this year?
We have programmed and we have a list that we can show you for 4 years of funding.
So this year, how much funding for this is the funding this year?
You funded us last year at $250,000. We have approximately, I think, $600,000 in our current budget. We have laid out a list of projects that will show you what a consistent funding level of $500,000 will build over the next 4 years. This was the list of projects that we presented at committee several weeks ago.
These are projects that y'all reckon, if we approve these, or these projects that y'all believe are the list of priorities based upon the policy?
These are the list of the projects that the priorities you've given us yield the scores for which the projects you see at the top, Holcomb Bridge Road, Nesbitt Ferry Road, Dogwood Road, Ramsey Street. Based on the scoring and priorities you have given us, those projects go to the top of the list. Based on 4 years of consistent funding at $500,000, you would have those top 9 projects built.
In over a 5-year period?
Over the next 4 years.
Next 4 years. Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Diamond.
Mr. Del Ross, as I understand it, the FY16 money has already been accounted for before this list?
That's correct.
Okay, so this would start with the coming budget year. So I would reiterate, you can't appreciate on this sheet that there are, just on the collector roads, without going into a neighborhood, about $60 million worth of sidewalks. And that's in today's dollars. So you can see the $500,000 a year is not going to go very far very fast. So I will renew my input for more funding as we go along to budget season next year. But all we've done here is basically reconfigure with very little change really to account for the fact that not only are we looking at between parks and schools and some of the traditional measures, but those places where you might be just close enough to walk to the grocery store or a commercial area, and make that a factor in the decision so that it gives us a little better picture. And because we try not to make it about whoever we like the best or is our friend in picking sidewalk projects. We try to make this a very clear and concise, scored thing that hopefully takes the political end out of it to it as much as possible.
Councilmember Eichelhardt, is that a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I do that, but yes, this is good. Just one clarification first, that this policy only applies to collectors and above, so it is not talking about the streets within neighborhoods generally.
This policy is guided towards filling gaps on public roads, collectors and above.
All right, just clarifying that we had a discussion about that earlier today and finally figured that that's the clarifying point. And then a point that's not really for you guys, but I totally agree with the criteria that we've added, because it only used to be the parks and schools, but and I totally agree with adding the commercial walk-ups, and certainly that the desired paths are critical, because that's where we know people walk. But I said this previously, and I still have a concern that the increased priority being the commercial walk-up, I just don't want to, I don't see that being the value over the schools and parks. So I have, again, no problem with it having a higher increased priority for desire path criteria, because again, those are the paths we know people are walking. But I don't think it makes sense to give the commercial walk-up higher than all the others. So I would recommend that we remove the commercial walk-up as an increased priority, is my suggestion.
Just a clarification, are we giving the commercial walk-up a higher priority, and a higher priority than what?
You can see it as the criteria that we are saying is a higher priority. We would be scoring out of a 10 scale versus the other criteria we're scoring out of a 5 scale. That's how we've emphasized weight on those 2 criteria.
I apologize if I don't understand it. So sidewalk prioritized based upon the following criteria. Are all these equally weighted, or is this, in this first category, are those all equally weighted, or is the first bullet number 1? Because corridor safety, is that a lower priority than distance from a park, or are they of equal priority? Correct.
For Exhibit A in the resolution, those first 7 bullets from quarter mile to a park down to corridor safety, those are our 7 criteria. If you see the next statement below it, increased priority will be placed on the commercial walk-up and the desire path criteria. Those 2 are scored out of a 10 versus the other criteria are scored out of a 5.
So those 2 have a higher weight, to answer your question.
The commercial walk-up, so Kent, are you saying the commercial walk-up in your recommendation would be in the other criteria column, or?
It would not have the increased priority. It would be on the 5-point scale as opposed to the 10.
Okay, just now I understand. Thank you. It just wasn't laid out that way. All right, so any other comments or questions before we entertain a motion? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Del Ross, I'd like to understand how that works on a practical basis. I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say 5s and 10s, and how that, if you had 7 criteria, how does that all add up to a scoring?
I hope this is clear on your screen. You can see, let's take the top line on this, Holcomb Bridge Road from Terramont Drive to west of Caliber Creek Drive. To the right, you'll see several columns. I'm reading across the top. Safety issue, 45 mile an hour percentage, quarter mile from school, quarter mile from park, quarter mile from commercial walk-up. If you see the quarter mile from commercial walk-up and the goat trail or desire path columns, those are ranked out of a maximum of 10 points, where the rest of the columns are all ranked out of a maximum of 5 points.
And what is the rationale for giving that a different measurement?
That was a way for us to capture what we were hearing from you during work sessions and committees. If the direction is to take all of the 7 criteria equally, we will be glad to implement that.
Do you have a personal recommendation? Are you comfortable with this?
Personally, the most important criteria I see on there is the goat trail. So I would absolutely want to weight that ahead of the rest. As far as commercial walk-up, what I remember hearing from work session and committee for the dialogue was commercial walk-up was a way to capture sidewalk and walking trips from residential areas to commercial areas such as a CVS or a drugstore or destinations for people that are making those walking trips that don't have access to a vehicle. So there was discussion about weighting the commercial walk-up and as a higher priority than the other criteria.
It's almost like could be over counting things twice because if you've got a commercial area and there are a lot of people close by, there's probably already a goat trail.
Could be, may
Could
not.
be.
May not.
But generally speaking, if there's a desire path, let's put it away, every place I've seen where there's a desire path to a commercial site, it's also that quarter mile, so it's almost counting it twice, but
Not always, though.
not always. Well, and here's just another point, and I want for the appreciation of the audience and the council. As I understand it, this is what your recommendation is going to be based upon. That recommendation then has to be approved by the council and is not binding upon the council. We're not setting a policy which will absolutely dictate if you rank here, you come first. What we're saying is, this is your recommendation. It'll come to this council. That council will factor in your recommendation and their personal observations and to make the final decision. This is not a binding criteria. It's a criteria for your recommendation, as I understand it.
The way we envision this happening is every year in the budget process, based on sidewalk connectivity budget that you give us, we will come to a committee immediately after that and present you a list of projects that we recommend.
And this council can look at that list and say we either agree, we disagree, or we agree in part. So it's not a binding criteria, it's a criteria on which to base your recommendation.
Mayor, exactly. Perhaps another way to say it would be the council has set criteria. This is a way for us to take requests or areas that we see from a staff, rate them objectively, and then assign a number to them. It's just basically a ranking process. It doesn't really it really just helps us strategize.
It's a recommendation.
Yes, sir.
And it's similar when we do a contract. Staff will come forward with a recommendation on a bid, and this council can accept that ranking or make a different choice.
Mayor, if you recall the paving projects that we have right now, we rank all the roads in the city, and then we bring you a list of those roads.
Well, that one we've accepted as gospel because we want to stay out of the politics.
I mean, if it falls as number 12 versus number 14, it's probably going to get funded, and because there's a little bit more money. But the idea is basically the same. It's that ranking.
Well, that one,
based on your criteria.
On the ranking of priority of maintenance, this council has stayed out of that and has accepted that as a final decision. When it comes, because of the subjectivity of this, I hope council will continue to take a look at this and review what your recommendation is, and it will help narrow the list, but I think the final list has to be compiled by council.
Right. The major difference between the paving and the sidewalk is paving is maintenance of existing infrastructure, where this is new work.
Questions that council may have? Councilmember Diamond.
I think that we may be talking about the same thing in one sense, in that the goat paths generally are the places going to the drugstores, going to the grocery stores. Where this quarter mile component came in is it's a way to break down bigger projects. For instance, Pine Grove, Shallowford was listed as one project all the way to the Cobb line. That made it a $2 million project. Who's going to walk that whole distance? And it was never going to happen. However, there's an awful lot of people who would like, within a quarter mile, to walk to Canton Street area or City Hall or Memorial Day, who can't right now because there's not going to be a goat path because it's just not safe. So that's a way to put that on the list where it didn't exist before anywhere in the rankings. So, it's still, you're not seeing it in the immediate future, but I think it's important to have it on there. Now, whether it's in the 5 or the 7, I don't have a real preference, but I do think we need to keep that as a criteria.
Do we have a motion?
I think you still have a comment.
Comment, Councilman Eichelhardt.
Just that I agree with Councilwoman Diamond's first point, that our whole goal here is to make it an objective as possible of the list, so we don't have to make the subjective decision. So like the paving, we're saying, you know, it follows the criteria that we set up, which was the intention for this criteria. So I think we should make it as accurate as possible. So again, go back to, you know, all the quarter mile, everything is great, just not to have the commercial walk-up as the additional, so to make it a 5-point and keep the desire path, goat path 10 points. That's my suggestion to whomever makes the motion.
That could be added as a possible amendment if it's not in the motion.
All right.
So, do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor. Oh, sorry.
Councilman, we have another question.
Thank you. I agree with Councilman Eichelhart. As far as corridor safety, we hadn't hit on that one yet. To me, that would be an important criteria. What is that scaled on, 5 or 10?
Corridor safety is a 5-point rating. You can view corridor safety as everything being the same between two projects. If I have one road where there is, say, a steep drop-off off of the shoulder, and if I'm walking, I'm required to be on the road, and cars are traveling very fast, versus another corridor where there is a wide graded shoulder that I'm walking on the grass and cars are driving slower. The corridor safety for the more dangerous road will cause that sidewalk to be built before the road that is perceived to be more safe.
Right, so it's a degree of safety. It's not whether it's a safety issue necessarily.
Correct. We are monitoring one of the criteria that we are not, that is impossible for us to score, but what we track for each project is whether there are observed pedestrian vehicular crashes along that certain stretch. It doesn't happen very often, but if there were an accident involving a pedestrian and a vehicle, we have a way to track those per segment as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions before we entertain a motion? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the resolution, is the Exhibit A part of the resolution? Okay. So in Exhibit A, I would like to move quarter mile from any commercial walk-up establishment down to other criteria staff are using to track projects. Is that what I'm hearing?
I thought it was just on a scale of 1 to 5 instead of 1 to 10.
Okay. Oh, I like that better. Okay. So, well, we don't have that listed in the resolution, so is that just a guidance thing? It doesn't say how many points we score it as. So do you need in the motion that would be a 5-point scale rather than a 10?
We will strike through commercial walk-up in the sentence below in the sentence. Okay. Increased priority will be placed on the desire path criteria.
Okay. All right. Got it?
The motion is to adopt the recommendation of staff with the exception of moving the commercial walk-up to the lower scoring list of priorities. Second by Councilman Eichelhart, motion by Councilmember Wynn. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Yes, come forward, please. Motion by Councilmember Diamond.
My name is Sue Dupart, 500 Shadowwood Court, and I have a corridor safety question on Alpharetta Highway by the IHOP. The sidewalk's broken, and when you're a pedestrian, and there's covered parking for a covered bench for MARTA, and there's nice treaded trails for people in wheelchairs going from curb to curb, but there's a broken sidewalk at the IHOP that's been that way for quite a long time. There's an elevation hazard where it's eroded, and who's responsible for corridor safety for the handicapped pedestrians that are walking on Alpharetta Highway at that location?
The city of Roswell
Okay, and then my other concern, because I know there was a sign, I think, when they did a new roof on the IHOP, and to me, that seems like, would it be the business's responsibility? Could you ask them? Okay.
It's in the public right of way, so we'll take care of it.
But it just any time that there's a zoning issue and no one notices the sidewalk is in bad condition in front of it, that is the IHOP when they put their blue roof on, I think. Pardon?
A new roof would not
No, but
require
when
rezoning.
I remembered when there was a sign and I couldn't make the meeting because I would have raised the sidewalk question. But anyhow, it's just like a teaser for a corridor question. When there's not safety, when the sidewalk is missing, it's eroded it's on a berm inlet, between two curb cuts, and it's a safety hazard. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Yes, sir, come forward if you'll give us your name and address, please. We have a 5-minute time limit.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Gary Mitchell, 2460 Roxbury Drive, Willow Springs. Councilwoman Diamond, would this be the matter or the next matter? This one? The next one. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Yes, sir, come forward, please.
My name is Robert Kessler. I live on Turner Road. My question, and it's just come to mind with respect to the walk-up, the commercial walk-up provision that you all have been talking about. Would this be a commercial walk-up within the city of Roswell, or would it also apply to a commercial walk-up within another bordering municipality?
That would be an interpretation for staff.
As long as it's in the public right-of-way, we certainly support the idea of small trips being done in a pedestrian way. So certainly we could say if it's another municipality, we would work with that other municipality to make sure. We wouldn't probably run a sidewalk just to the end of our city limits and end it.
Right.
We would like the other municipality to join us so that it's a continuous path. So if it's a complete and usable facility, we would support it.
Okay. But even if it is in another municipality?
We can approach them and discuss the issue with them.
The reason for my question is our subdivision, it borders on Alpharetta and Roswell, and I would hate to see this provision permit a connection that possibly the neighborhood would not care for by virtue of the fact that it's connecting to a commercial establishment in another municipality, mainly the city of Alpharetta.
Well, that's why I made the comment to staff that this set of priorities is staff's recommendation, but ultimately it's a council decision. And we have enough neighborhoods who are actively seeking sidewalk improvements that the neighborhoods who are opposed to sidewalk improvements are lukewarm or not going to rise to the top of the list.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Any further discussion by council? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
All right, the next item is approval of a text amendment to Chapter 18, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places, Article 18.1, Management of Streets and Public Right-of-Way of the Court of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. This would be first reading. Clyde and Steve are here to talk about it.
Sure. Thank you very much, Councilwoman Diamond.
We'll have Mr. Davidson read it first.
Mr. Davis, yes, sir.
And get the legal technicalities out of the way, and then you'll have the floor, and you can tell us what he just said.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 18, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places, Article 18.1, Management of Streets and Public Right-of-Way of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Chapter 18, Streets, Sidewalk, and Public Places, Article 18.1, Management of Streets and Right-of-Way of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia, is hereby amended by adding thereto a new Article 18.1.9 to read as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and have approved this to the first reading.
Thank you. This action is different than the previous action. The previous action was to try to connect gaps in our public right-of-way. This is essentially a grant program where we're trying to encourage connectivity throughout the city, possibly on public rights-of-way, perhaps not on the public right-of-way. We're trying to encourage creativity, and we're trying to encourage partnerships with our community members and stakeholders to encourage things such as the new PTV ordinance, so that as people become accustomed to getting around the city either as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist, or perhaps in a golf cart, we can figure out creative ways to connect our city.
The exhibit in front of you is basically the priority and the policy. Policy has two parts. It is a policy that allows for a person to make a donation, a group to provide a 50% donation of the estimated cost, and that would enable it to be considered by the city council, whether it's on any of our lists. So it's an open program. It allows a person to make an application, and if they make a donation or find a way to make a donation of either 50% of the funds, and they can include right away in that if they happen to have it, then it enables it to come forward to you for consideration. It doesn't change anything about the project, doesn't change anything about how you consider other projects. It just says if they do that, then you will consider it when they do that. Homeowners associations have fundraisers. They sometimes have a kitty that they've been raising, and they want to use that money during a certain period of time. This enables that to come forward at that time. The second priority is if it's not on that priority list that you just considered in the previous item, then a private resident or business can increase that priority if they have 100% contribution and a letter of approval from the impacted property owners in that area. So what that does is if it's not on the collectors and arterial streets, it's in a private subdivision or in a subdivision, it's a public road, it's just not a collector or arterial, then again, you will consider it if they will bring 100% of the funding and every property owner is in agreement. That's the criteria. The rest of the program is just a grant program providing for an application whereby you would get to be able to consider it in the same manner as you do other sidewalks or other projects, because we would rate it by the same criteria so you could have something to compare it to. It might not compare well. It may compare well. Sometimes they do. And so it gives you that opportunity. And then the remainder of it is just an application process whereby those things would come to you for consideration, and the applicant would have to describe themselves how they are providing the match, where the match is coming from, and their level of support within their community. We're not going to do that for them. They have to do that, but it comes to you, and if they will do that, it gives you the ability to consider that as an option. It's a wide open program. It's a grant process. We've had requests from communities like Riverwalk on Pine Grove, Willow Springs folks who were mentioned here earlier, Riverbend on Steeplechase for road striping. We've had Girl Scouts ask for benches, and we've had, most recently, we've got 4 requests for PTV paths, which you haven't not heard yet. So any of those things could be considered. All this does is give you a pot in which to say, okay, put them in this pot, we'll consider them, and shake the pot when they come forward. And we would rate them like other projects, and you'd have the ability to consider it. Any questions about the process or the app?
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Diamond.
I think this has morphed a little bit, and I understand the legal interest in putting it all in one spot. I worry that we've put this all in one thing, and we really are talking about apples and oranges here. One of these, the number 1 in the policy A is really the grant, and most of this is the grant program, but I don't know the better way to do it, but my concern is that number 1 is a specific grant program. We set aside money, people apply, it goes to the network. Number 2 is if a neighborhood wants to put in something that really isn't on our radar at all, they want to pay for the whole thing, they've got their own funding. That has been confused with the idea that we will force sidewalks on people and make them pay for it. And that's, I don't know any other way to say it, because we keep trying to say that, but I don't feel like the word it's getting understood. And I don't know any other way to say, I've never heard anybody say we want to assess anybody to put a sidewalk on their house, ever. Right. And yet we keep having this conversation. So I guess my question maybe is to legal, when we're not all here talking about this 10 years from now, is this clear enough that this is a separate thing? Because there are people who, neighborhoods are split. Some of them want to have it, some of them don't. And that's up to their HOA. That really isn't our deal until it comes to us as a unified front. So
in that respect, I guess that's my first question, and then I do have a wording question on number 2.
It would be just a suggestion, if we're looking under A 1 and 2, I would make A, and then I'd have a B, and then I'd have a C, because if you have A, B, and C, it's easier to keep them separated with each a title. Then it just follows a little differently. So under this 18.1, we've got A policy, I'd have a B, another policy, and C, another program, because they're all separate programs, and by itemizing them separately, it's not as confusing to me.
And that's something I guess we can look at in second
That
reading.
can be done in the second reading.
Additionally, on number 2, as I understood it after a committee discussion, was if the private business owner or neighborhood wants to pay for their own sidewalk and pay 100% of it, the letters of approval would come from every property owner that was impacted on their personal property. Because in the city right-of-way, that could be a different story. In the discussion of if we had all the money in the universe, now that our policy is everybody has sidewalks, would we put them everywhere within the right-of-way? I realize it's a rare occasion where it's only in the right-of-way, and if it goes an inch out, you need that property owner's permission. And if they don't do it, then deal's over. But in those cases that it is within the right-of-way, I would hate to see us, can we even legally tie our hands by having that approval requirement?
Well, this is just for the council to consider it. The council can always go in and put sidewalk in right away whenever they want. This is just consideration. If somebody brings you 100% and they have approval from 100%, then you can consider doing this.
So if your HOA, under this, if your HOA has 15 people and 14 of them, and they all are assessed, because that's their HOA and they're under their rules, then one person whose property is not impacted on their personal property could stop the whole thing.
I think you'd be hard to say that somebody wouldn't be impacted by having a sidewalk put in their front yard.
Right, but when I was hearing legal say, the right-of-way is the
right-of-way
right-of-way.
is the city's, and the city can do whatever they want.
Right. I just hate
But
to set up a
under this
policy.
program, if somebody comes to you with 100% participation and 100% of the funding, then you can consider whether you want to do it or not.
Okay, well, I'd like to get the will of the council on that, because that's not the way I thought we got it in committee.
That's not what I thought I heard at committee. What I thought I heard at committee was 100% of the estimated cost would be paid by the HOA or the neighborhood. But if the sidewalk was not in the right-of-way or an easement was necessary for the construction of the sidewalk, then a letter of approval from that homeowner was necessary. It wasn't 100% of everyone that was impacted, because if you take where I live, which is Willow Springs, I'm not directly impacted by the sidewalk and the sidewalk construction, but I'm going to be impacted by if I have to pay for it. So is the letter coming from me? But my understanding from the committee was if we had to deviate from the right-of-way at any way, if it's for a temporary easement, permanent easement, whatever, that's the letter of approval that was going to be necessary for the sidewalk project to go forward. That was my understanding.
Perhaps we could correct or clarify that and say approval from every physically impacted property owner.
I would suggest you get with Mr. Davidson, because lawyers have can have a very broad definition of what impacted means. And I think we need to we don't want to have something that's subject to different interpretations, and I would get with the legal department to make sure we have a legally definable term or terms. We certainly want to have clarity.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that I'm going to be on record that it's not every person that's going to have a sidewalk in the front yard. It's the ones we have to go outside of the right-of-way, either for a temporary easement, permanent easement, or, to purchase any type of land to do the sidewalk. It's not everybody that's going to have a sidewalk in front of their house. That was my understanding of the committee. Councilmember Diamond, if I'm correct, okay, thank you.
Councilmember Eichelhart.
I was originally going to clarify, but now I'm confused myself. So, because I thought the number one was only the collector roads, as Councilman.
This is different.
No, that was another policy.
Policy A1. So then, that's what we were talking about today, but I thought this was the implementation of that policy.
No, that was,
Okay, well then, Mr. Asenbeck and I had a conversation that didn't apply to this. So let me then go straight to this other point on number 2, because essentially then what you're saying is we could put a sidewalk in someone's front yard that doesn't want it, but as long as it's in our right of way, they have no recourse if we don't need to go into their property as an easement or anything. Is
well,
that
and
what I just heard?
I don't see us doing that, but I hate to see us put in there a criteria that would indicate that we wouldn't do it without that, because I don't think that's legally the reality.
But that's been the whole concern throughout, is that we're going to come in and put sidewalks and people don't want them. And I thought initially that we were covering for that, because if they don't want them, we won't do it. But that, what you just said is, well, we will do it as long as it's not outside of the right of way.
And it's totally paid for by the homeowners. The
but
concern
that-
I was
there could
hearing
be a
was
large
they're
number
going
of
to
homeowners that
charge
don't
us
want
to
that.
put sidewalks in front of our neighborhood. And like I said, there's very few neighborhoods where this applies, but I feel like if they want to come with all the money, and these are, most of this is not an issue, but I want to make sure we're clear, because everything I've always heard is if the city has some need to do that or desire to do that, that can happen. I don't see this council doing it. They haven't done that in the past, but I just think that's
A
putting up
suggestion. This says the city will agree. I think perhaps we should say may agree and leave it up to the council.
Okay.
If you change will to may, that's a significant change, because if you say will, someone could argue we're entitled to it as a matter of right. If you say may, then it becomes a decision of the council, and they're not obligated to proceed.
Okay, that's my motion. To move through first reading with those comments and suggestions.
That's not good enough. You need to summarize it again, or maybe
You
staff
said
could.
so.
I've lost it now, but I want council to understand what the motion is.
All right, well, we're moving through first reading, and we're going to clean this up, so I guess that's the
So
bottom
it's
line.
motion to approve the first reading, and is, let me see if I can tell you what I think we said. One is we're going to change the numbering so that they not be, we'll have an A, B, and C, and we'll change will to may. And we're going to define what impacted means. Is that your motion?
Yes, and we'll come back with a couple options, and,
We can do that in the second reading, but those are that summarizes it.
yes.
Does the council understand the motion? We have a motion. Is there a second? Is that a second? Second by Councilmember Wynns, motion by Councilmember Diamond. I'm going to open it up to the floor for comments now. If you have any questions or comments, we'll hear from you. You'll identify yourself. I know you did already, but we have a recording this, and for the record, if you'd identify yourself again, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor and Council. Gary Mitchell, 2460 Roxburgh Drive in Willow Springs. In listening to your discussion, I'd just like to clarify, if the HOA comes to you with 50%, they must come with 100%, okay? And my question would be, would the city assess at any time? The answer is no. Okay, thank you. Second question, what
Just a
percentage?
clarification.
I'm sorry?
There's, the city may have the legal authority to assess.
Yes, sir.
I think what Councilmember Diamond is saying, this council does not support the assessment.
Understood.
This council cannot bind the next council.
Understood.
But this policy doesn't provide for 50% or assessment.
I'm just trying to understand as you're going along with this. Second, what percentage, again, I want to clarify, I understand the legality of you having the right-of-way and based on the original plat maps from the developer and the right-of-ways that have been granted and the interpretation by the Transportation Department, that you can indeed build sidewalks on your property. But my question is, as a practical matter, what percentage of homeowners, be it the affected ones with the concrete on their lot or the total population of the subdivision, clarify what percentage does the council want to see that approve? I'll tell you why I'm asking. Okay. Right now, the chairman of the Sidewalks Committee, who has just taken an informal survey, has approximately 400 residents out of 700 who have responded in relation to this. 253 have said yes, which is 36% of the total population. The Sidewalks Committee, which you directed us to in the HOA, continues to publish information that confuses us, and that's why I'm asking. At this point, we don't have a definitive answer, if I'm understanding.
I don't believe this council would support something which does not have a consensus of the neighborhood to go forward with.
No, and more
which
importantly,
to me means more than a majority.
Yeah.
Now, what that number is, I don't think we've reached a
okay, so that's what I'm trying to clarify.
But I don't see this council supporting that which is supported by a minority of the neighborhood in any case.
No.
Well, and again, you have to understand that we as residents are hearing from the HOA and from the Sidewalks Committee. We've done what you've asked, and we appreciate that and speaking to you, and we're trying to clarify that. Last question. The chairman of the Willow Springs Sidewalks Committee, Jeff Jablonski, is a resident of the neighborhood. An HOA board member, serves as the Sidewalks Committee chairman, and is on the City of Roswell Planning Commission. I am requesting tonight to the council, until Mr. Jablonski finishes lobbying the city for Willow Springs sidewalks, will the council dismiss him from the Planning Commission and not allow him to serve in any capacity with the city until this is decided, because I believe he has a conflict of interest and a vested interest in these 4 positions.
The council is not obligated to answer that question, but if any of the council members wish to respond, they may.
I do have a couple questions.
Councilmember Diamond, do you wish to respond?
My first comment is, the only way that a neighborhood would have 100% of the money would be, I would assume, an assessment, which I don't know how your HOA is done, but my understanding is yours isn't even all in the HOA. So in order to get that kind of money, you're on 37% is not going to get you an assessment. I mean, regardless of how many surveys you put out, that's, getting opinions is one thing. Getting people to commit to an assessment is a totally different situation.
Understood completely, but again, the information provided to us has been very confusing.
Yes,
I go back to my
understand.
question before the council. Will you dismiss Mr. Jablonski serving on the Planning Commission until he quits lobbying the city as a resident, the chairman of the Sidewalks Committee, a board member of the HOA, and a member of this Planning Commission?
This council is not taking up the matter for a vote. If any council member wishes to respond to you, they can individually, but the council is not, the agenda
Understood.
item of removal of a board member is not on the agenda tonight. So we're not going to be taking a vote on that or making a decision on that. Again, I see Councilmember Diamond is the only person with her hand up. I'll call upon her.
Where no one else will tread at this point, but this doesn't go to Planning Commission, correct? It's not an initiation, it's a first reading. It's not.
How would we, going forward, Mr. Mayor, put this before the council for a vote? How would the citizens of the subdivision make this request?
A council member may place something on the agenda for a discussion. The citizens would have to go through a council member, the mayor, or the city administrator can place things on the agenda.
Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Yes, sir.
My name is Roger Arndt, and I live on 2945 or at 2945 Roxburgh in the same subdivision as Gary, and I appreciate his comments. If I can just clarify, because it seems a lot of things are repeated multiple times to make sure that everybody's on board. You can have a situation where the people who are affected don't want it, whether you call it right away or it's on my personal property, we don't want it. The majority of the people don't want it who are affected, and still have a vote that says we have the funding. And what we have right now is a letter from the Homeowners Association basically saying that we have not a unanimous, but a majority who are in favor and are supporting the funding for this project. When you have 700 homes, 100 are affected, it's easy to get a majority of the people voting for the funding, but not necessarily a majority of the people who are affected with the sidewalk on their property. And I think the problem that we've had, by the way, I've met with Mike Elliott and your team in the past. I've been told numbers like it takes 90%, it's 100%. There is no number that anybody knows. And we can't get a percentage right now because what you're saying, it's 100% on funding. What I heard you say is it's 100% on funding. You have to come in with your own money. But then you said, and it doesn't have to, as long as it's all on right-of-way property, it doesn't require any homeowner's approval. So I think you do need to look at the percentages, and you have to be more clear in what you're communicating to the HOAs because we keep getting different stories. And as a result, we've got a lot of contention in the neighborhood that we shouldn't have right now because we don't know what the city will allow us or not allow us to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to comment? We're back to council. We have I believe we have a motion and a second. Yes, come forward, please. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you. We're in no hurry. I apologize for not recognizing you.
My name is Peter Clark. I live at 2510 Roxburgh Drive in Willow Springs. I've lived there for 40 years. I'd like to ask a few questions as it relates to this very hot topic in Willow Springs, the retrofit sidewalk proposal. Since this type of project, I'm assuming, would be considered a capital improvement, would that affect my property taxes if the sidewalk was installed on my property?
Not directly. When I say that, every dime we spend affects the budget, but it would not affect your individual property taxes. Your individual property taxes are set by, the assessment is set by the Fulton County Assessor. That's the assessment. The largest portion of your property tax is set by the Fulton County School Board. The next largest portion of your property taxes is set by Fulton County. The smallest portion being set by the City of Roswell, and this would not make any individual determination. So whether we chose to move forward with a sidewalk project in a $100 million budget is not going to have a noticeable impact on any individual project. In cumulative, everything that we spend affects how much money we need to operate, and so I can't tell you it has no impact, but I will tell you there's not a direct connection.
Okay. Since I would be liable, or at the very least a defendant in a lawsuit, for any injuries on my property as a result of a sidewalk being placed thereon, what is the position of the city assuming such risk of liability?
I would disagree with your assumption. Mr. Davidson can address that as the city attorney. And the question, I understood it was, your understanding was if there is someone on the sidewalk, which is in the public right-of-way, that has a slip and fall, perhaps because of a crack, are you, as the adjacent property owner, in any way liable? Mr. Davidson, if you could respond to that question.
You would not be liable. That would be totally the city's response to answer any kind of lawsuits or anything like that regarding the sidewalk. For
So-
any hazards on the sidewalk, any breakage on the sidewalk. Now, you would have responsibility for maintaining the grass and stuff on the sides of the sidewalk, but other than that, if it has something to do with the sidewalk in the right-of-way, it would be a city responsibility.
What about the maintenance of the sidewalk?
That's city responsibility.
Like right now, all the rain we've had, there's leaves on the ground, it's slippery. If somebody slipped and fell on that sidewalk on my property,
They would come
could
to
I
the
be
city.
accused of not maintaining it by keeping the leaves off of the sidewalk?
Accusation or a legal cause of action? There's two
Legal
different
cause of
matters.
action.
No, there would be no legal cause of action.
If the plaintiff sues me as a party to their lawsuit, what I'm hearing from you all is that you will defend me in
No,
that
sir.
lawsuit.
Sir.
You won't.
No.
So I
that's-
could
we're
be
not
sued.
indemnifying you if.
We can't stop somebody from
We
suing.
cannot start, you know, what I'm saying is they would have, the judge would dismiss the action when the facts became clear. If you put a man trap in the sidewalk and capture somebody as he's going by, you're going to be liable. But short of your placing some obstacle in the sidewalk, a good example, if someone has a wreck on Roxborough Drive in front of your house, there's no liability. The sidewalk is really just an extension of that road, so there is no legal liability.
Mr. Mayor, let me fire these other questions at you before my time runs out. I appreciate your response.
I've taken up a lot of that time, so please ask all your questions.
The Willow Springs HOA sidewalk plan calls for part of the sidewalk route to run along Country Club of Roswell property as well as along the Roswell Village Shopping Center property. The HOA says that the city requires this routing. Does the city in fact require this stipulation for the sidewalk routing?
That would have to, I'm not aware of a requirement.
So it's not required, okay?
Well, the requirements are is that it be, you know, we don't have any list of requirements. We try to make sure it's safe, and we also look for a complete and usable project. We try not to have a sidewalk that stops, and is not a complete unit. So if we have it, we would like the sidewalk to end at a destination and not just be in the middle of nowhere.
Well, it would have to go out to Old Alabama Road, and it'd go across those two pieces of property to connect to Old Alabama. So I'm assuming that you would want it.
We have not looked at it from an engineering standpoint. We have not set any requirements.
Okay, so that's still up
A good example is Martin's Landing has a school. If they didn't have a sidewalk near that school, we would support a sidewalk within the neighborhood leading to that school. But we try to, you know, if you look at that set of priorities, we try to look at schools and parks and things that, and goat paths and things that people are using.
Can I buy 2 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We were told in the August 31st City Council meeting that the city has $95 million worth of sidewalk and connectivity projects on the drawing board with an annual budget of only $500,000 for such projects. Since Willow Springs is such a low priority from a safety standpoint for sidewalk construction, and since the city budget clearly has other much higher priorities, how can the city justify at any time allocating any resources for the Willow Springs sidewalk project?
Number one, we don't have $95 million of sidewalks on the drawing board. We have $95 million worth of desire, but we're not working on $95 million worth of projects. That would be another waste of time. The city's time at this point in time, as far as Willow Springs, has been in response to inquiries from citizens. This is not city initiated, but this is a responsive city government. And when there are requests from the citizens, we'll take a look at those requests. Whether it's a homeowners association or individuals or groups, we try to respond to questions. But the city has not allocated resources to this, except to the extent questions have come to us and we've tried to answer those questions. So the city is not actively designing anything, but when questions come to us, we try to reply to the questions, just as we are tonight, replying to your questions.
So the Willow Springs HOA would have to come with 100% of the funding for you all to consider this project. Is that correct?
Under the project, under this policy currently being considered, that is correct.
And the city would not be assessing the homeowners for this project?
No one up here, and no one who has been elected and is a council-elect has ever suggested that, nor would I expect them to.
Okay. My last question is directed to Mrs. Wynn. Since you're a resident of Willow Springs...
All right, here's my rules, not council rules, because council hasn't established any rules. You can address a question to me as the city, but this is not an opportunity to interrogate individual council members. So if you have a question, you can ask the presiding officer for the city to respond to that question. But my policy is to say, address it to the city.
Okay. Well,
If you have a question to address to the city,
Let me
and if a
rephrase it.
council member wishes to reply to that, they can.
I'll be glad to rephrase it. Mr. Mayor, one of the Roswell City Council members is a resident of the Willow Springs subdivision, a member of the Willow Springs HOA, and a member of the City Council voting on sidewalk policy, which would directly or indirectly affect Willow Springs property owners, such as myself. Therefore, my question is, should not the council consider this individual as having a conflict of interest, and that individual excuse him or herself from further voting on this type of subject?
That question is best answered by our city attorney, who advises on what conflicts of interest are. Now, if there's not a conflict of interest, this council would not have the authority to remove a member that's voting. We may disagree with each other from time to time, but a council member, no elected official can be removed by the council without cause or without, I think it has to be a felony or.
Watch it, Mayor.
So we politically disagree, and sometimes folks think that you may have a special interest, but a special interest is not the same as a conflict of interest, and removal takes more than Mr. Davidson would have to reply, we've never had to consider removal of a council member. Oftentimes, council members have abstained or recused themselves from a vote, but Mr. Davidson can address the authority of this council to remove a council member from voting, and that's something I don't know about.
In this situation, this is a citywide policy. I know that you think it applies to Willow Springs. We don't have any application from Willow Springs. We don't have a policy yet. So this is citywide. There is no conflict of interest for any member up here because there is no application. So there's no reason for anybody to recuse themselves.
And Mr. Davidson, if you'll define what conflict of interest further, it's simply because living in a neighborhood in which there is a rezoning or across the street is not a conflict of interest. Financial interest is a conflict of interest. Having a family member involved in decisions is a conflict of interest, but it's not simply because someone has a more of an interest than others. That's not a legal conflict of interest.
That's correct. That's exactly right. And I will tell you that I am ultra conservative, and anybody up here that has ever asked me, I tell them if there is an appearance of impropriety, I recommend that you recuse yourself, and most oftentimes they do. But in this instance, there is no even appearance because this is a citywide policy.
Very good. I want the council person that I'm referring to know that I'm not suggesting she be thrown off the council or put in jail or anything of that nature, but it does appear to us, some of us anyway, in Willow Springs, that there could be a conflict of interest there. But if you say there isn't, there isn't. That's all I've got.
Yes, come forward, please.
Appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Hello. And first, I'm honored to be here. You know that you said that. I'm the one that's honored to be here. Thank you. My name is Mary Holvey. I live in 10535 Turner. And thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to see you again. And as always, I love those ties. My kids love them too. Now, and I'm going to make this.
I'll keep wearing them just for you.
I love them. I tried to get my husband to do it, but he says it doesn't look as good on him. Quickly, is this where they're talking about connectivity also? Can you guide me or not? This is where I can talk about that?
We are talking about connectivity in a lot of different ways. So this is not the only subject of connectivity which this city has discussed. This is simply, we've looked across the board trying to make Roswell easier to get around and more connected.
Now, last time we spoke, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the 26th was the last meeting? I think that was the last meeting where you voted, correct me. I don't know if can I pass this to you?
The last time this subject came up, it was at committee. is
Right,
my
it was the
recollection.
26th, I think, of October. Okay.
28th, at the committee, Councilman.
Okay,
Weems
I'm
came up
passing
for my vote.
an email in which the HOA has stated that our connectivity is off the table. And then when I saw you on the 26th, all of a sudden it's on the table again. Sorry? Oh, thank you. I didn't even know you could do that. Thank you very much. So I'm requesting an open file so we can see what's going on in Willow Springs. So the people that actually live there can see what's going on. The reason for this is, as you could see from the paper there, connectivity is over. We're not cutting through my house. No one's driving their little electrical golf carts through there. But from the 26th, all of a sudden, it's back on the table, and the city's looking at it, and there's a possible, we're blinded by all this that's going on. So that's one thing. So that's what
So as far as your request, if you will get with the city clerk.
Thank you.
And make a request, there's a procedure.
Yes.
You make the request, you're charged by the copy.
Okay.
And all correspondence between cities and their citizens and neighborhood associations or you just need to be specific in the request, and they'll make copies for you. But you need to give them make your request to Marley Press. Marley's not here any longer. Marley Press is waving at you, city clerk. If you'll call
Yes,
the city clerk
yeah.
and make your request, she'll be glad to furnish those documents.
Exactly, because out of all, I believe, how many, 700 homes? We were not aware that the park was one of the things that they were doing, the connectivity, that they were going to cut through and do a two-man cell. And I think that we all have vested interests on that. Now, when you're talking about affected, correct? And I know that's something you're going to the topic at. The sidewalk is not going on my property. I would be the only one paying. I would be the one paying for it. And my question is, does that mean I feel I'm affected? That's money I could put in my kids' college fund. So I'm interested to know. And one of the things that actually target all this was, I felt that it was unconstitutional that I was required to pay for the country club. I think they have enough money, and the strip mall. So I felt it was unconstitutional that to get the sidewalk, I had to pay for the country club and the strip mall. I mean, I think it's a fair statement.
No, I don't believe it is fair.
Okay.
The reason I don't believe it's fair is, to my knowledge, first of all, I'm not sure anyone is asking you to pay for the sidewalk. The city's position is not going to be assessing for the sidewalk.
Correct.
So I think your question presupposes someone's going to assess you for the sidewalk. Although it is constitutional for the city to make assessments.
Okay.
I don't know how many times different ways I can say this, but there is no intention, expectation, discussion, thought, remote possibility of the city assessing Willow Springs homeowners for a sidewalk in Willow Springs.
Okay. Now,
is anything else, any way to make that clear?
One more thing. Remember, we had this little talk on the 26th. I said, is the city of Roswell going to make it illegal to have a house without a sidewalk? That was my question to you.
The city is not going to make it illegal. You need to wrap it up now.
Okay.
You're out of time, so if you got another question or closing.
Yeah, but the reason why I'm saying that is that if you are forcing the gentlemen that they don't want the sidewalk on the right-of-way, how can you justify using the right-of-way when we don't rank anywhere close to getting the sidewalk? That's my only question. I'm not trying to be hostile. I'm asking, how can you justify the sidewalk?
We're not trying to justify the sidewalk.
Okay,
no one up here has tried to justify the sidewalk. No one here is supporting the city paying for the sidewalk, assessing for the sidewalk. So, you may answer one more question, but as far as the city, how can they justify putting the sidewalk in? No one up here is trying to justify that.
Okay.
That's not what we're trying to do. We're simply trying to respond to questions and create a policy which said if someone comes with 100% contribution, this council may or may not choose to accept that contribution and put a sidewalk in. The caveat was we're not even going to consider it if there's any easements, right-of-way acquisition, or other property rights taking involved.
Thank you, and we will make an appointment for the open record review. Thank you.
You don't need an appointment, just give Marley a call. She'll tell you what the fees are. She'll try to
Okay.
estimate how many emails there are.
Will we be able to get something that states that it is not a requirement for the country club or the strip mall?
The city, the transportation department can respond to your questions, but I'm not sure the city's
Well,
going
how
to
about
make
a
a
simple
blanket
email?
statement.
A simple email saying, is it required to pay for the strip mall and the country club?
I will tell you, nothing is required.
Thank you.
We're not creating any requirements. We're creating priorities and policies which this council may choose to follow. The reason we changed will to may is to make it clear that even once we adopt this policy, it is finally a decision of this council and not a requirement. We're not establishing any requirements. We're simply establishing recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Come forward, please.
I'll make it quick. Jennifer Arndt, I live at 2945 Roxburgh Drive in Willow Springs, and I was just a simple math major, but based on the budget you have and the number of projects you have, I'll be dead before anybody even gets to the point where there's sidewalks in Willow Springs. But I think based on the commentary that folks made, the real critical thing that I would ask of you, because there has been a lot of divisiveness in the neighborhood, and I've been in the neighborhood for a long time, and we've gone through this several times, and back when y'all were going to pay for it. If you can come up with just some really clear, there was some great criteria y'all came up with for the other projects, just something very clear that can be used with the homeowners that says, come up with a number. Whatever your number is, 75, 85, 10, 2, 3, don't really care, but something clear that can be presented. And it's not just to Willow Springs, but to probably other HOAs, because who knows whether they'll be back at you. Just something clear that says, here's our criteria.
We are making every effort to, and if there's any recommended language.
Yeah.
that
10-point
you can
scale,
give us,
5-point scale, won't confuse me if you use 6
recommendations
scales.
on this policy we're adopting. We'll
Yeah.
have another hearing. When is the next hearing on this? I hope you all come back. We've had a great time on this. Wouldn't miss it. I know you wouldn't. We love to see our citizens down here. We like listening to them, especially Don Horton. That's his specialty. He's got the big ears and the hat to go with it. So we'd love to have you back. But if you've got any suggestions, you can either give them to Mr. Asenbrack or City Clerk, or Councilmember
Perfect.
Diamond is liaison to the Transportation Department, and she'll be formulating this.
Thank you.
So
Great, thank you.
Love to hear from you.
We'll give the input and appreciate you guys listening, but I think that will help clarify
Does
some of this.
anyone else
Thank
wish
you.
to speak? No, we
I'd just like to thank you and the council for allowing us to come
Well,
speak.
I will allow you to say that we do have a policy that I have a policy that we give you one opportunity to speak, and even if it's something nice. But I think what you said, I appreciate what you said. So, does anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Asenbrack, we don't need to hear from you. I believe we have a motion and a second. This is the first reading. It can be revised between at the second reading, and I anticipate further lively discussion. Councilmember Diamond.
And I would like to reiterate why this came about in the first place. And there's been a number of opportunities where an Eagle Scout wants to help make a connection, trail opportunity, somebody's willing to donate the property. We don't have a mechanism to do that. The Girl Scouts came, they wanted to pay for a bus stop. We didn't have a mechanism for us, how do we consider that, how it's decided? And I know that sounds simple, but apparently it's not. So in trying to make, whatever we do is going to be citywide. It's not a Willow Springs effort, it is a citywide effort. And because we're pursuing this path, has nothing to do with our
intention or desire to force a sidewalk on anybody who doesn't want it, because it just costs too much and there's too many people that do want it.
All right, any further discussion before we take a vote? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I think the intention was good, as Councilwoman Diamond just said, that they're trying to solve some issues, but then we've gotten into way more than I think we ever intended. And I know every time I can think of when we try to put sidewalks in existing neighborhoods, it's always been a problem. There's never a good solution. People are always not going to be happy, and so we shouldn't force it on people. So I think we should just let this go or do something, but I don't see any point in bringing this forward. I think as it stands, it's actually going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. So either we should take it back and start over or just not move forward with it.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Horton.
I would just like to see us define impacted property, not just from a standpoint of the physical property itself, but also the cost, if that.
Here's what I understand as it currently sits. Staff, let me know if I've misunderstood it. There was one definition of impact, and the only one I've heard is if there is a right-of-way, if there's property rights involved. If you need an easement, if you need right-of-way acquisition, that's impacted. To say that your adjacent property is not impacted unless there is a taking. But if this council wishes to expand that definition, you need to make that suggestion. It's Transportation Director Steve Asen. That's the way I understand impacted right now. I'm not trying to limit that definition, but that's what I've heard.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'd like to offer that this was a very humble origin for this. It has gotten a little bit out of control, but taking a page out of Alice Wakefield's playbook and the UDC, I think what would be very helpful for this discussion is a graphic where we can show some houses, show what right-of-way is, show impacted, define impacted in a graphical way like they have done in the UDC, go a long way towards perhaps helping the citizens understand and also countering some of the misperceptions about what this is and what this is not. So I think engineering staff will put together a graphic to help as a sample or a specimen or some type of thing, the way Alice does in the UDC. We will do that.
Councilmember Horton, we're trying to define that, but if you've got something further to add, we're all ears.
Well, the only other thing is, not only do we need to define the impacted property, but also what percentage of letters of approval from the impacted property need to be present.
Well, right now, it would be if you're impacted, it's 100%. What we're saying is if we don't have the consent of all the impacted property owners, we don't move forward. So that would be 100%. If it's a number less than 100%, and the definition of impact changes that too. So again, there's an opportunity to make an amendment between now and the second reading, but I would encourage you to discuss this with the Transportation Director and the liaison, Nancy Diamond, because she will be making the motion on moving this thing forward or not. And I don't think we're going to be discussing this at committee. It's second reading, so those are the folks to talk to, and I encourage you to do so. Any further discussion? Councilmember DePolito.
Thank you. Just to comment, I live in a neighborhood that has sidewalks on both sides of the street, and there's a lot of folks who move there, including us, because we like having sidewalks on both sides of the street. But there are two houses in the neighborhood that don't have sidewalks. In fact, my next door neighbor doesn't have sidewalks. So you're kind of walking along, and all of a sudden, the sidewalk ends. So what you do is you walk down the driveway, you walk on the street, and you get back on the sidewalk when it starts again. It's not the end of the world. And at one point, when I first joined the HOA, we tried talking to the homeowners, and they said, you know what, we don't want a sidewalk. We just don't want people there, and we have landscaping, and we just, as a neighborhood, we just said, all right, well, you won't have a sidewalk. And that was kind of the end of it. So they're still there, been there 14 years, and there's two houses that don't have sidewalks. It still works. You can still walk around, and it's fine. So, you know, we talk about impacted property. If people don't want a sidewalk, don't make them have a sidewalk. Just my thought.
Any other further discussion? All in favor of the first reading, raise their hands. That would be Diamond and Wynn. All opposed? Dippolito, Horton, and Eigelhart. Motion fails for lack of a second.
Sir, can I try?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
I
Because,
mean, it doesn't fail for lack of a second. It was
right.
defeated.
So the question is, there is another whole piece of this, which is the majority of it, that had nothing to do with that part of the discussion.
Well, you would have to, as it is, I will ask the clarification. Is the opposition opposed to the entire second reading or a portion?
To me, as it stands, it's just so confusing that it doesn't solve anything. It makes more problems than it solves.
So A, B, and C you're opposed to?
I think.
Well, see, most of this is predicated on the grant program. So if you take out number 2, which is the sidewalk piece, the residential that we're talking about, which has been the only contention I've heard about this, you know, I think we need a way for the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts to do projects in the city.
Yes, Councilmember Dippolito.
I would support this if we took out A2. And we can, I'm happy to revisit that if you want to keep
I
letting
will
it churn.
entertain a second motion. The first motion having failed, Mr. Davidson, can we get a motion to I assume we can entertain another motion to amend this?
Yes.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to propose something less than a full adoption of all the sections.
Okay?
And I apologize for interrupting, but I just want to get back on procedure.
No,
Is there a
that's good.
second motion?
Yes. My motion is to move forward the first reading, deleting paragraph A2.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Perhaps we can get a, move that forward. Any further discussion? Councilmember Eigelhart.
I think I'm okay with that, but I would suggest that we try and bring this back one more time to discuss outside of a committee, a council meeting to resolve all these things.
Okay, do we have a
Before bringing it
committee
back for a
meeting
second
between
reading?
now and the next reading of this?
We can have, yes, sir, the next.
Or do we have
committee-
one scheduled? I'd rather
No,
not.
No, sir, the committee meeting, well, yes, we do. We have a committee meeting. We moved it. It would be the 18th.
So we can bring this to committee on the 18th for
Yes,
further
sir.
discussion.
And then should the committee move it forward, it would be on the 23rd, mayor and
So
council
can we,
agenda.
so we would have a, if we move to approve the first reading, can we leave the dates? Do we need to set a date?
The 18th.
We don't have to set a date. Why don't we just approve the first reading and send this to committee for discussion? Can we do that? Is that part of the motion?
No, sir, I would like to ask the homeowners, because they have been very diligent about coming into all these meetings, and rather than have them come to a committee and another council meeting to have the same discussion, I'd like to get their head nodding or shaking on this, because at this point, it's deleted for the second reading. Do you want to hear us go back and discuss it in committee and then come to council, or do you want it to go to
Let
council?
me rephrase it. Y'all, put the policy back up on the board. I know you're very concerned about the 100% contribution. And the proposal is to remove that from the first reading. So it would be, the policy would have to do with multi-use pass, applicants provide 50% estimated cost, and this meets the connectivity, the collector road. 2 would come out. May assist interested property owners' development of roads and pedestrian paths. That would come out, and B, the connectivity partnership program. Do y'all have any, she's just trying to save you another trip. Do you want to come to the next committee meeting, or do you feel that's? All right, let's just bring it back to committee. I think if we're going to, I think we might as well bring this to committee. I hate to spend a lot of time, but there's a suggestion, and I'd like to, my preference was to have full opportunity for discussion and consideration. And although I try not to burden our citizens, I think that those who wish to participate, we need to encourage them to. So I would encourage us to just pass this as revised and move forward with it, bring it to committee, and then see how it fares at committee. See if we can work out these issues. So let's go back. The motion, let me rephrase the motion and the second, and correct me if I'm wrong. The motion is to pass it with the first reading with A, 1, and B. And the refinements that we had talked about earlier don't apply now because the definition of impact doesn't apply, and the will to may doesn't apply anymore, and so we don't need to make those changes. So we're passing it. The motion is to pass the first reading with deletion of A2.
Right, which the first time you said A and B, but it's actually A, B, and C. So the motion is actually to move forward with the first
It's
reading.
A1 and B.
But there's more than that. So we're just deleting A2.
A2.
And bringing it back to committee.
Does the full council understand that? Any questions about the motion? All right, we're voting on the first reading with the deletion of A2, which is the policy about 100% contribution. All in favor of the motion? That is unanimous. Racing right along, we're now to...
Still me.
Still you.
Approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a memorandum of agreement for the North Fulton Comprehensive Transportation Plan, catchy name NFCTP, with the Atlanta Regional Commission and cities of Alpharetta, Johns Creek, Milton, and Sandy Springs. Mr. Asenbrock.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. Let me introduce, for those of you who haven't met, John Crocker, who is our Transportation Planning Manager, who will talk about the details of this partnership agreement for the cities within North Fulton County.
Good evening. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. About 5 years ago, we adopted the North Fulton Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and it's time for it to be updated. At that time, the Atlanta Regional Commission ran the procurement process and the billing and on behalf of the 5 cities up here, so that it was a cleaner one. They have experience with federal procurement and those types of things. What this memorandum of agreement does, it sets up a process so we can begin the procurement to develop the update of the North Fulton Comprehensive Plan. The budget for the plan is $1.25 million. $1 million of that is federal funds coming from the Atlanta Regional Commission. $250 is split equally between the cities based on population. Roswell's share is $62,500, and it's in a mid-year budget request. Unless you have any other questions.
Right, and I understand that this has been voted on by our sister cities, and who has passed this?
The only one who has not passed it is Johns Creek, and it's on their November 16th agenda. So Sandy Springs, Milton, and Alpharetta have all passed it.
I encourage the council to work with our neighboring cities in coming up with a common plan. Any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Who serves on the committee?
Which, the Atlanta Regional Commission, or there are 2 committees that are...
Transportation plan. Is there a transportation plan committee, or that's yet to be
What the
set up?
MOU spells out, there are 2 committees. There's a staff level committee made up of technical staff that will help guide the day-to-day process, make a recommendation of selection. Then we also have a policy council made up of the mayors of 5 cities, so that when we need policy direction, they're the ones who will be setting it. And then we will actually come back to the council for adoption of the plan and provide updates as needed.
And I will assure the council that the council's direction will be followed as far as what we adopt. I will be the representative of the city, but it is a council decision as to what position we take on that comprehensive plan.
I think last time we had 2 council members that went instead of the mayor, but that's
There'll be a
fine.
specific stakeholder advisory committee as part of the public involvement plan. The composition of that has not been determined, but that's definitely an opportunity to either have a council member sit on there or have a representative from the council.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So do we have a motion to approve, what's our share of this grant?
$62,500.
Do we have a motion to approve that?
Sir, and that's actually a portion of the match to it. The ARC, the federal funding is for $750,000. We are splitting the $250,000 match with the sister cities.
Correct.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve the $62,000 match by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Next item is approval of an amendment to section 22.6.1, speed limits appendix of the City of Roswell Code of Ordinance. This would be the first reading. I hate this one. Can I just say I hate this one?
Yes, you can. Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. So we have talked about this in the past. I'm going to turn this over to my deputy, Mohammed Rauf, to give you the details. But basically, we need to readopt the entire slate of speed limits so that after the first of the year, we're still legal.
For the audience and the new council member, if
Yes,
you
sir.
could explain the rules of the game.
I'll let Mohammed,
If you'll explain the rules of the game. This is not really, we don't have a lot of say here.
Good evening. So for the city to run the speed radar on any of our public roads, we need this approval from the State Department of Public Safety. And we go back and get this approval from the State Department every 2 to 3 years. And the current approval that we have, it expires on December 31st, 2015. So that's why we are moving forward. The only change to this one would be the new establishment of the new school zone on the new school at Highway 9.
So we're establishing a school zone in front of the new school.
Yes, which...
Now, that's the only one the DOT approved.
Yes, that is the only...
It's my understanding we had a substantially longer list, which they did not approve.
Yes, we have that as an attachment as well, but to clarify on the school zone, we've had it read twice in the city back in August of this year at a 25 miles an hour. That's what we requested for the school zone to be, but GDOT came back recently and they said that they would not approve a 25 and they are suggesting a 30. So that's what staff is now recommending as the only change to the speed limit ordinance.
And we have to accept the GDOT recommendations if we're going to use radar to enforce speed limits.
Yes, and the other 3 other requests that we made that got denied, they are included in the packet, and the header is the summary of changes. We had the Highway 9 Midtown section. We requested to reduce it from 40 to 35 miles an hour. That got denied. The Riverside Road from Highway 9 to Dogwood Road, we requested it to be lowered from 40 to 35 miles an hour. That got denied. And then Eatrus Road from Hardscrabble to Cox, we requested 45 to 35 or 40, and that also got denied.
Mr. Davidson, if you'd read the ordinance.
Thank you. This is an ordinance of the City of Roswell City Council setting speed limits on certain streets. Now therefore, to accomplish the foregoing, the mayor and council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. Chapter 22, Traffic and Motor Vehicles of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia, is amended by deleting therefrom Article 22.6, Speed Limit Appendix, and substituting in lieu thereof a new Article 22.6 to read, as set forth in the appendix attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. And if approved, this would be the first reading.
Do we have a motion? Oh, Councilmember DiPolito, was that a question?
Yes, it's somewhat related. I've had a lot of requests from folks who are looking for a flashing light. If we get this approved, are we going to have the flashing lights for the speed limit?
At
Or
the,
at the school zone?
At the new school zone, yes, we will get that. When we get this approved, yes, we will get that.
Okay.
Currently, what we have out there is posted at 25 miles an hour, but that is not approved by the State Department of Public Safety. That was just what we approved within the city, did the second reading, submitted it back, but then GDOT never gave us the final approval. So that's why it's out there without flashing lights.
Okay, yeah, there's just folks who don't understand or don't see the small sign of, when does the school zone apply? So there's a lot of driver confusion out there, so as soon as we get that light flashing to help assist that, I think that'd be helpful.
Yes, definitely, and that'll go actually overhead, so that'll help. Yep.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
Yes, but I would like to reiterate that local control should be on local roads. And we approved this a while back with 25 miles an hour because we never dreamed, and this is me talking, not staff, that we never dreamed that GDOT would not allow a 25 mile an hour speed zone on the school. And the fact that they are giving us 30 as a compromise is not the end of the discussion in my mind, and I will continue to lobby at the state level for local control of our city roads because I just think it's wrong. And there's about 15 on my list, so I appreciate all you guys do, and we'll keep working on it. So yes, I make a motion to move forward.
Motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Wynn. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
All right. Approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with J.G. Leone Enterprises, Inc. for the Sun Valley Stormwater and Pond Grading Project construction in the amount of $1,473,000, $473,852. Mr. Asenbrock.
Thank you, Councilmember Diamond. Again, I'm going to turn this over to Rob Del Ross, but this is the first phase of the Sun Valley Road Connector, and that is going to build the pond, install the culvert, and the wetland improvements and the road base, and then we will do the second part later. Rob.
Basically, Mayor and Council, if you remember from many months ago, you directed us to install a regional detention in this area in addition to the road project. Staff decided that the best, most efficient way to construct this project with the stormwater component and the transportation component was to build this in 2 phases and award the pond modification work to one contractor, with the road work coming approximately 4 months later to a second contractor. The item we're recommending to award tonight is for the construction work for the first phase of this project.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Do we have an estimate of the construction for the remainder of the project at this point?
We are confident that the construction for the second phase would be under our budget. According to the item, we have $4.3 million left in the budget. Depending on bid prices, it's going to be difficult to predict. I would say between $3 and $4 million.
Okay, but we're confident that'll cover.
We're confident 4.3 will cover it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Do we have a motion? Did we get a motion?
Oh, no. Move forward, and thank you to staff for going back and keeping at this. I know the original bids were not ideal, so thanks for keeping at it and getting it lower.
Is there a second? Motion by Councilmember Diamond for approval of that contract, second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Yes, sir. Come forward, please, if you give us your name and address.
Mayor, Council, Lee Fleck, Martin's Landing. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it to make sure it's on the record. The source of the $1.47 million is where?
Mr. K-Love, if you'll answer the question.
For this contract, part of the funding was from the general fund capital projects. The total project budget has multiple funding sources, but this is the initial project funding.
Is a portion of this funding $1.4 million from the bond that was passed a couple years back?
We appropriated funding from the bonds to this project. However, Mr. Lee, is the original budget amount adequate to cover this contract, or is a portion? It is? Yes, ma'am. Okay, then no, sir, this is all general fund money for this
Okay.
contract.
For the Sun Valley,
For this particular contract for the
for
pond, yes,
this
sir.
particular contract?
Correct.
Okay, well then, since you've answered that question, it was rather strange that the number was identical to what I was led to believe was moved from the $2 million in the bond money over to this project, and the other 500,000 was going to beautify the overpass on Holcomb Ridge over 400. I want to express my disdain for the fact that those bond monies have been moved to any portion of this project. And I would certainly like this city to consider looking at the intersection at Jimmy Carter and 800 and see if that is a viable alternative to Holcomb Bridge and 400, specifically the crossover. When you got everybody coming from Alabama, where do they want to go? They want to go southbound onto 400. Right now, you've already.
I apologize, Mr. Fleck. You
Right
said
now
Jimmy
you've-
Carter?
Yeah,
Outside of the city of Roswell?
yeah. You know what I'm talking about, the crossover?
You may
They
proceed.
got it at Peach Street?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I apologize for interruption. You may proceed. I just
Okay,
didn't
just-
get it. Now I
Okay.
get it.
Now,
Thank
yeah,
you,
okay.
sir.
Right now, the way you've modified the exit ramp off of northbound 400 to eastbound Holcomb Bridge, you got a quarter of that type of intersection already. You're stopping the flow of traffic on Holcomb Bridge. You're letting the people exit off of the exit ramp off of 400, although right now, since you took the Form 2 lane sign, everybody's gone back to 1 lane. So we're not using that left lane. So put your, use 2-lane sign. I have to go on the berm, as other people do, to get around 15, 16 cars in 1 line, and the other lane is completely empty. But at any rate, my point is, I would like you to think about something like that, because that seems like a viable option long-term in coordination with GDOT. And since you already that money was supposedly funded towards an early exit ramp off of 400, we're in that general area. So I still oppose the movement of those funds from the bond to the Sun Valley project. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak on this agenda item? We have a motion and a second. Councilmember Diamond?
I would like to point out, yes, we did look at, it's called a diverging diamond, and it was one of the first conversations when I started on council that was going on, and we had high hopes that that would be our solution, but actually our intersection is bigger than the ones that are using it, and it modeled out that it would not support the traffic that goes through that intersection. So as much as it looked terrifying on paper, it's a very interesting alternative, but it just didn't model, and it wouldn't work. And I hate it because it was cheap and quick and would have been a great alternative. And, you know, I still, despite what you read in the paper, which later got changed online, the early off-ramp is not a dead project. It is something that GDOT has doubled the cost of effectively by some of their decision-making, and we can't make the bond money in time. We have a specific responsibility to our bond rating to do projects on the list in a timely manner, and that was our priority. So we definitely want to get back to that, and I've heard from citizens from the east side and the west side for years that that fence is a blight on our city, and with CIDs on either side of us that make things look beautiful with taxing the property owners to do it themselves, we're at a seriously competitive disadvantage, and right now it looks just sad. So I'm comfortable with what we did. I know that it takes the, out of the $14.7 million on the bonds, about 10 of it were going there and east, but now only 8 of it. But it is still, I feel like, the responsible choice to make sure we use the money. So move forward.
Motion to approve this contract? We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That would be unanimous. All right, we have a recommendation for closure discuss. One more. Councilmember Eigelhart, how could I forget you? I apologize.
Charles has been sitting here all night. We have to let him come forward. This is the approval for the resolution of 2016's Community Development Block Grant allocations.
Thank you, Councilmember Eigelhart, and I'm not about to let Charles sit out there after he's been here this long and not come up here. This item is, I can introduce it. Charles can help you with any of the projects that you might have questions on. We had about 12 applications for the 2016 program year for CDBG. These are the allocations that you all worked through previously. Absent Council Member Horton, who at the time was not council member, so welcome and glad you're here. But these are the CDBG applications and the allocations that you all approved. If you have any questions about those, Charles is here to answer those.
Do you have the list of those projects? Oh, it's on the sheet here.
If I can zoom in on that a little bit.
So the largest project being $212,000 for the Child Development Association intersection improvements. The full-time grant specialist, was that required to administer this?
That's correct.
That's just the cost of doing business. It's not really, it's a,
Right. That's administration cost that goes in every year to keep our program running for administration,
Right.
professional
So
services. Charles,
this isn't a profit, this is to pay for the cost of tracking all of this.
Absolutely, it's just for costs.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Eigelhart for approval. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Horn. Does anyone, Horton, I apologize. I am a slow learner, as you've noticed. Councilmember Horton. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Do we have a motion? Oh, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We have a motion. We have a recommendation for closure to discuss personnel, litigation, and real estate. Do we have a motion for closure? Is there a second? Second. All in favor? We expect everybody to vote on this whether they want to or not. That's unanimous. Always vote no.